Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Became a Hero Without a License? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. The first time Izuku had his dreams broken, he was 4. Sorry kid, it's not gonna happen. The boy froze in place, All Might action figure clutched in his hand. His smile stayed wide and plastered across his face even as his eyes dimmed. His brain sputtered to a halt, freezing in its ongoing list of possible quirks. He felt his fingers loosen, the action figure falling to the floor. He heard himself let out a strangled noise, but he wasn't fully aware of anything anymore. Distantly, he heard the doctor explaining to his mom something about X-rays and pinky toes. The same voice that had just crushed his dreams with one sentence. Sorry kid, it's not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. Izuku doesn't fully digest anything that's happening around him until he's sitting back in front of the computer that night, watching his favorite clip of All Might. Hearing his mom come up behind him, he turned with the same hollow smile as before, tears swelling in his eyes. See that, Mom? There's always a smile on his face no matter how bad things get. Even when things seems impossible, he never gives up, he choked out. Through the tears, he could see the woman try to hold in a sob. Do you think I can be a hero too? With that, the dam broke and his mom, the one person who was supposed to support him through anything, let her tears flow and hugged him. I'm sorry, Izuku. I wish things were different. The boy stayed silent as his heart finally sank. That wasn't what he had wanted to hear. He had wanted to see the woman smile like she always did when he talked about his dream. He had wanted her to hug him and say, "Of course you can, Izuku. Things aren't any different now. You just need to work hard." It didn't get any better from there. 5 days later, he went out to play with Kaken for the first time since his diagnosis. What do you mean you don't have a quirk? The blonde stared at his friend, incomprehension clear in his eyes. Izuku looked down at his feet. Mom said it's called being quirkless, he mumbled. She said it's kinda rare nowadays. So, you lied. The greenette's head shot up. It was his turn to not understand. What do you mean, Kaken? I didn't lie to you. Stop it. You're lying again. Kaken shouted, angry now. He clenched his hands into fists, digging his fingernails into the skin. You said you'd get a quirk soon. You said we would be heroes together. You said so. You promised. Izuku took a step back from his friend, warily glancing at the small explosions coming from the boy's fist. I'm sorry, Kaken. Thought I would. It's okay though. We can still be heroes together. I just need to work hard. Oh, I know, I can be an underground hero. They're so cool, I found out about them a few days ago. They go around at night and don't like talking to reporters, a lot of them dash. You're still lying, the explosive boy growled, cutting Izuku off. Quirkless losers like you can't be heroes. Besides, who would want to be an underground hero? If they're really that useful, why did you just hear about them? The greenette shrunk into himself, scared at the other's anger. I don't know, he whispered. Kaken smirked, though he was still clearly angry. So you're an idiot too? I don't know why I've spent so much time with a stupid, weak, quirkless dummy like you. From then on, Kaken and his gang of kids would take any opportunity they had to pick on the boy. He started coming home with more than just the average childhood bruises. Burn marks littered his arms from where the blonde had managed to grab him, cuts and gashes scattered his hands from catching himself falling over and over again. When Izuku noticed his mother's reaction to the marks, he started to hide them. She already worried enough about him, she didn't need to see him harmed. Izuku, dear, can you tell me how you got all those cuts on your hands? Inko asked an 8-year-old Izuku. He had come home from playing in the forest with bloody hands and a forced smile. Oh, Kaken and I were playing in the trees again, he quickly formulated. I fell and had to grab onto the bark. I guess I didn't realize how bad they were. Inko wasn't an idiot. She knew her son was hiding something from her. However, she knew that pushing it would only make him clam up and hide away in his room. Instead, she sighed and said, Let's go to the bathroom and clean them up, all right? After getting a nod, she continued. And Izuku, you don't have to hang out with anyone you don't want to, okay? Even if they're family friends, if someone makes you uncomfortable, you stay away. The boy only nodded and gave her a watery smile. It was smaller than the one he had on when he walked through the door, but Inko noted with relief that it was a lot less forced. It went on like that for years, Izuku coming home with wounds that were obviously purposeful, hiding them from his mom and treating them himself. Thankfully, the burns rarely scarred anymore. His shoulders and upper arms were littered with ones he was given before he learned how to properly treat them. All could be covered with a shirt, for which the boy silently thanked whatever deity was listening. Unfortunately, that sliver of luck fell short for the various cuts. Most weren't noticeable unless you knew what to look for, but there were a few on his face he had to use concealer on, bought with his own allowance, just like his first aid kit. By the time Izuku was in his last year of junior high, he had become something of a loner. Certainly not by choice, but there wasn't much else he could do when all his classmates either actively bullied him or ignored him. He tried to not let it get him down, tried to ignore the gaping hole in his heart that only grew with each day. I can work with this. I can do this, he chanted to himself. After all, what kind of hero hopeful would he be if he couldn't handle a few hits or harsh words? He ignored the part of him that whispered, "They're not just hits and harsh words." It started as a great day. That in itself should have made Izuku wary. He hadn't run into Bakugo on his way to school, nor did he see the blonde on the premises before school started. Even during class, there had been only 3 insults thrown his way before lunch. 3. That was a record low. During the lunch PRD, he had made his way to his usual place on the roof. He had originally chosen the spot in an attempt to hide from the other student during his first year, but they had found it in only 2 weeks. Since then, it was rare for him to eat. The food his mom packed for him, it was always stolen, made inedible by quirk usage, or throw onto the ground. He only tried to move spots once, but that had ended with some particularly nasty bruises smattering his torso. That was beside the point, however. It seemed like today was one of the rare days they left him alone. He happily ate the home-cooked meal, ecstatic that he was able to enjoy the food in peace. He should have known it wouldn't last. It was the last PRD of the day when tension was always high and kids tended to ignore the teacher. They were all paying attention, however, when the teacher got to the topic of high school. The teacher spoke harshly. So, as third-year students, it's time to think about your futures and what you want to do with your lives. I could pass out your career aptitude test, but he trailed off, throwing the pieces of paper tests, Izuku assumed, into the air. Why bother? We all know you all want to go into the hero course. The class cheered, all activating their quirks to some capacity. The boy next to Izuku grinned and flexed his muscles, an enhancement quirk, the greenette noted when they first met, while someone behind him brought a fireball into existence. Izuku sunk low into his seat, raising his hand meekly. He wasn't really sure what he was going to ask, but his first instinct was to get out of the classroom when everyone was showing off. You all have some very impressive quirks, but no power usage allowed in school. Get a hold of yourselves, the teacher lightly scolded. Izuku couldn't help but flinch slightly at that. Now that's an important rule to follow? Hey, teach, don't lump me in with these bunch of losers, came a voice near the front of the class. I'm the real deal, but these guys will be lucky to be sidekicks to some busted D-lister, the boy who spoke scoffed. The class was sent into an uproar. Someone shouted, "You think you're better than us, Katsuki?" The teacher looked down at the papers still in his hand. You've got an impressive test result. Maybe you will get into UA High. That sent the class talking yet again. He's gonna try for the national school? That school has a 0.2% acceptance rate. It's impossible to get into. Bakugo glared around the room. That's exactly why it's the only place worthy of me. I ace all the mock tests, I'm the only one at this school who stands a chance of getting in. I'll end up more popular than All Might himself and be the richest hero of all time. Then people all across the world will know who I am, and it all starts with UA High. Oh yeah, Midoriya, don't you want to go to UA too? The teacher asked, completely ignoring the blonde's tirade. Izuku sunk lower into his seat, covering his head with one hand. Silence filled the room before everyone started laughing. Midoriya, you're kidding, right? Isn't there, like, a rule against quirkless applicants? Izuku scrunched his eyes shut. He muttered under his breath, I was hoping they'd make an exception. An explosion right next to his ear caused him to jump so high he fell off his chair. He whimpered, looking up at the cause with wide eyes. Listen up, Death. You're even worse than these demon rejects, you quirkless wannabe. You really think they'll let someone like you in when they can have me? Worthless losers like you aren't even allowed to try out. Huh. No way, you got it all wrong really. Izuku scrambled to assure his childhood friend, I'm not trying to compete against you. You gotta believe me. He looked down at his lap, still sitting on the floor. It's just that. I wanted to be a hero since I was little. I may not have a quirk but can still try my hardest, can't I? He finished quietly. You'll never be able to hang with the best of the best, you'd die in the exams. Defenseless Izuku, Bakugo mocked. This school's already crappy. Even if they did allow you to participate, you really want to embarrass it more by failing so hard. Alright, you boys finish this somewhere else, okay? You all need to get home, the teacher cut in. Bakugo gave Izuku one last look over before scoffing and turning on his heel. Izuku waited for all the kids to leave before even thinking of packing up. As the last student left, Izuku picked himself off the ground and looked at the notebook sitting open on his desk. Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume. The Greenette had started writing them as soon as he learned about the rule against quirkless applicants. After all, they couldn't decline him if he was good enough, even if he didn't have a quirk. Right? Before he could start another round of self-doubt, the book was ripped from his hands. Izuku yelped, stumbling back. He could have sworn everyone had gone home. I don't know what you think you're doing, Deku, but we're not done, Bakugo growled at the quirkless boy. What you got? His diary. One of the two boys behind the blonde asked. Huh. Don't tell me you're taking notes on how to be a hero. Another said, shocked. That's so pathetic. He's delusional. Real funny guys. Just give it back, Izuku said. He didn't want to deal with them after what happened in class. Bakugo looked at him before raises a hand, explosions crackling in his palm. It made contact with the notebook, singeing its cover and making the corners curl in. Izuku looked on in horror as the boy lets him see the damage, before promptly tossing the book out the window. Izuku let out a strangled cry, seeing the book fly out the opening and down. He quietly prayed it didn't land in the koi pond beneath the window. A hand landed on his shoulder, making him jump. He bit down another cry as he felt his shoulder heat up and begin to burn. Here's a word of advice, nerd. Don't even think of applying to UA or else. Inside, Izuku was panicking. He could feel his heart hammering in his chest, see those scarlet eyes burning into him almost as much as the hand. He wanted to apply, but his shoulder was burning and he didn't want to hide another injury from his mother. Shakily, he nodded his head. That's just sad. I thought you would have at least some fight in you. He finally gets it. He'll never be a hero. Better fine now than later, I guess. Bakugo finally let go of his shoulder, but his eyes were still harsh and uncaring. You know, if you really want to be a hero that badly, there's actually another way, he said casually. Izuku felt a flutter of hope in his chest before it was killed as quickly as it came. Just pray that you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof of the building. Idiot. If I really jumped, that would mean you instigated a suicide. Think before you speak, Izuku mumbled to himself as he walked. He stopped just below the open window, sighing as he realized his notebook had, in fact, dropped into the pond. He reached in, shooing away the koi that were nibbling on the paper. That's not fish food, stupid. That's my notebook. As soon as he got the book, he started his journey back home. It was later than he would have liked. The confrontation with Bakugo took longer than he thought. He thought back to the day he was diagnosed quirkless. He still remembers the feeling of his mom hugging him, her tears wetting his shirt as his world crumbled around him. That day, he made a promise to himself. No matter what anyone else thinks, he'd just have to believe in himself and he'd keep smiling, just like All Might. With the hero's name in his mind, Izuku walked underneath an overpass, forcing a smile on his face. The expression left immediately, however, as he heard something dripping behind him. He snapped his head around. Green sludge had taken up the entire opening, leaving no room for light to come in. With dawning horror, Izuku realized the sludge had eyes. That meant, "You'll make a perfect skin suit for hiding, kid." Izuku shrieked, turning to bolt away, but a tendril of sludge grabbed him by the head. He dropped his analysis book in favor of clawing at it, but it only caused more of him to get entangled. "Don't worry, I'm just taking over your body. It'll be easier for both of us if you don't fight back. It will only hurt for a minute. You'll feel better soon," the villain soothed. "What if this is the end? What will happen to my mom? What if this is for the best?" The question stayed unanswered as he drifted into unconsciousness. Izuku awoke to someone slapping his face repeatedly. It kicked him into fight or flight, pushing himself back and throwing his hands up to protect his face. Had Bakugo found him? Where was the heat? "Though we lost you there," a cheerful voice shouted. It was deep and decidedly not Bakugo's. Izuku looked up, only to shriek. All Might, the All Might, was standing there, smile as wide as the posters. "Well, looks like you're moving around all right. Sorry about that back there. I didn't mean to make you caught up on my justice NG. Usually, I pay more attention to keeping bystanders safe. But it turns out the city sewer system is pretty difficult to navigate." The man laughed, completely unaware of the panic attack Izuku was on the verge of having. "Anyway, you were a big help. Thank you. I've captured the evildoer." Izuku shook himself out of his stupor, squashing down the anxiety bubbling in his chest. "Holy crap. I gotta get an autograph. I gotta have a pen around here somewhere. Please, sign my notebook," he rambled before looking down at the page he opened to. His eyes widened. The man had already signed. "Thank you so much. This will be an heirloom, a family treasure, back for generations to come." All Might laughed again. He turned, squatting down and preparing to jump. "Well, I gotta take this guy to the police so they can take care of him. Stay out of trouble. See you around." Somehow, Izuku managed to formulate a cohesive enough thought to shout, "Wait! I have a quick question. Please let me ask it." The hero paused, turning around. "I'm sorry, young man, you'll have to make it quick. I'm on a tight schedule." Izuku took a deep breath before rambling out. "Is it possible to become a hero even if I don't have a quirk? I'm a normal kid, actually, I'm abnormal, but not in a good way. Without any powers. Could I ever hope to be someone like you?" All Might froze. Slowly, as if choosing each word carefully, he replied, "Pro heroes are always having to risk their lives. Some villains just can't be beaten without powers. That's without taking into account the laws stating quirkless individuals can't enter hero courses, much less be officially licensed. So no, I honestly don't think you can be a hero without a quirk." The man sighed, his eyes softening ever so slightly. "If you want to help people, there's plenty of other ways to do it. You can become a police officer. They get crap because the heroes capture most of the villains, but it's a fine profession. It's not bad to have a dream, young man. Just make sure your dreams are obtainable, realistic, understand. I honestly don't think you can be a hero. Sorry, kid, it's not gonna happen. Worthless Deku. I'm sorry, Izuku. Quirkless losers like you can't be heroes. Make sure your dreams are obtainable." At that moment, years of disapproval and hatred came crashing down. It always hurt him, but now he was hearing it from his hero. He didn't notice All Might leaving, he didn't notice the jarring feeling of concrete on his knees, didn't even notice the stream of tears coming from his eyes. At that moment, he truly did feel like a worthless Deku. Was everything he ever heard right? Were the insults hurled his way true? Every beating he took, every scar he got, they always felt like they were leading up to something. That they were worth it. That each time he had to pick himself back up, every fake smile he threw his mom, every trip to the store to get more bandages and concealer were worth something. He sobbed there for who knows how long. When he finally dried his eyes and picked himself back up, the sun was setting. Shoot, Mom's gonna be worried, he thought. He stuffed his notebook into his backpack and booked it home. As soon as he opened the door, he was greeted by a blur running at him. pulling him close. "Sorry I'm late," Izuku murmured. His mother pulled away, keeping her hands on his upper arms. Worry shone through her eyes. "Are you okay? You weren't answering my calls, and you're never out this late." "There was a villain attack," the boy said quietly. At his mother's gasp, he quickly rushed out assurances. "I'm fine really. A bit bruised up, but all the hero saved me." He didn't know why he didn't tell his mom about All Might, he just couldn't bear to think about the symbol of peace at that moment. "I think I'm gonna skip dinner if that's okay. I'm kinda tired." His mom nodded. "You look tired. Clean up in the bathroom and leave your uniform outside your door. I'll clean it so it's ready when you need it. Sleep well, okay?" Izuku smiled at his mom. She was always so understanding. "Thanks, Ma. Good night." Izuku dropped his bag in his room before doing as Inko asked. He stared up at the bedroom door, staring at the All Might plaque proudly proclaiming, "Izuku." He lifted his hand, paused, and then took it off the door. He just couldn't think of the hero right then. It was around midnight, and Izuku hadn't gotten a wink of sleep. Everywhere in his room, the symbol of peace looked back at him. Each time he saw that smile, the ever-growing hole in his heart grew a little bigger. The hero's words were on repeat in his head. "I honestly don't think you can be a hero. You can become a police officer. It's a fine profession. No matter what anyone else thinks, just have to believe in yourself and keep smiling, just like All Might." Izuku shot into a sitting position, eyes widening. That's it. Sure, All Might was the #1 hero, but he still fell into that anyone else category. He'd just have to prove him wrong too. It might be hard, but it's what he'd been doing with everyone else in his life. What's one more? With a smile, the greenette fell back. UA opened its application season incredibly early, as going into hero work was a huge decision. He'd mail his application tomorrow. That night, he dreamed of rooftops and flying. "Sweetie, you have a letter from you." It was just over a week since Izuku sent the application in. His mom had frowned when he did so, but she didn't stop him. He had gotten no sleep the night after, worrying that they'd just ignore it or think it was a joke. What could they want with him so soon? Maybe it was just a letter of confirmation, telling him they received his paperwork. Yeah, that was surely it. He walked over to Inko, taking it from her. "Thanks, Mom." He ran to his room, opening the letter as he went. He waited until he was settled to read the 2 pieces of paper inside. As he sat on his bed, he realized with confusion and growing dread that, "Dear Izuku Midoriya, we regret to inform you that your application has been denied. As stated in the Hero Education Laws, Section 102A, no quirkless individual shall be allowed, for their own safety and the safety of those around them, to participate in any Japanese hero school course. However, there are other courses available in which you would be permitted to attend. Based on your high scores in every subject, the best recommendations are the business course or support course. We apologize for any confusion that lead to this misunderstanding, and wish you well in any future endeavors. Imiko Ogawa, National Board of Hero Education. Izuku felt numb. He thought that maybe, just maybe, he could be the first quirkless hero. That maybe the world wasn't as against him as it seemed. But the letter denied him of that little bit of hope. No matter how many times he read it, the words stayed the same. The last time Izuku's hero dream was crushed, he was 14. He was fine. Everything was fine. There were always other courses, he could still go to his dream school. It was fine. That was a DMN lie. Izuku was tired. Tired of the roller coaster of emotions, tired of being beaten down, tired of getting back up each time. Each time he thought things, for once in his godforsaken life, were going his way, they were ripped away from him like it was some silly game. His mom made yakitori that night. He was glad it wasn't one of his favorites. It would have felt like another punch in the gut. Like some higher being mocking him, the only thing going right for you is food. How sad is that? Inko seemed to sense his mood, know what the letter was without seeing it. She gave him a sad look. You could always go for the support course. I know how much you love analyzing, they'll probably have classes for that. Izuku cleared his throat, which had felt plugged since he left his room. I don't know. I still want to go to UA, but I think I'm going to go for the general education department. If I went into support, I'd work with heroes and, I don't know, it would just rub it in my face. The only words spoken between them after that were quick exchanges of good night before he went to bed early. Despite going into his room, he couldn't make himself sit on his bed. Instead, he paced around the room, trying to alleviate the discomfort he felt. He changed his room up quite a bit in the last week. He took down most of his All Might merchandise, swapping it in with various other heroes' action figures and posters. He didn't hate the man, far from it. He still idolized him, even if his own interactions were unpleasant. It was simply that he couldn't take the smile. The grin that used to say you can do it, plus ultra, was now a harsh reminder of everything he wasn't and everything he'd never be. Stupid, stupid Izuku. Did you really think he'd tell you any different? Kaken's right, you're nothing but some quirkless wannabe. You should have taken the hint when your best friend turned against you. Like the teachers say, he's smart. A lot smarter than you. Of course he knows how to tell when someone's a waste of space. You deserve all those scars. Why else would no one help? Hell, you know you deserve them, that's why you never told Mom. Don't insult All Might's intelligence by thinking he wouldn't be able to see something so obvious. Shut up. The words came out as little more than a whisper as Izuku grasped at his hair, tugging. The voice was right, of course. He was weak. He couldn't even handle something that only existed in his mind. How the hell had he expected to be a hero? He faintly heard his mother go to bed, realizing he had been lost in his thoughts for hours. He checked the clock, a simple, run-of-the-mill one that replaced the symbol of peace. 12. He sighed, knowing he wouldn't be able to go to sleep. Instead, he elected to check on his supplies. He had noticed some things running low the day beforehand when he had to patch up yet another burn. As he suspected, he had begun to run low on antiseptic, and it wouldn't hurt to get some more concealer. He thought about getting more in the morning seeing as it would be Sunday, but in the end, decided against it. It would just be on his mind for the next few hours if he did that. If he went now, there were bound to be stores open. He knew for a fact one place he visits is open 24. He hesitated. His mom had just gone to bed, so he couldn't leave his room without her hearing him in the hallway. If he went through the window, however, he opened it looking down. The apartment was on the 4th floor, meaning he'd have to not only climb down but also climb back up. He knew he wasn't too strong, but he could do that with help from the outcroppings below. Pushed away again to grab the closest hoodie, a dark Viridian pullover, and pulled it on. Grabbing some money, he quickly calculated how much he'd need to bring and stuffed the amount in his pocket, grimacing. It was about half of his saved money gone. He'd need to be careful not to waste materials so he wouldn't have to ask his mom for more money. Opening the window wider, Izuku twisted so he was sitting on the windowsill. In the dim light, he could just make out an overhang only a few inches below his feet. Carefully, he slid down until his feet touched solid ground. He let go cautiously, testing his weight on the thin ledge. He repeated similar steps until he was on the street level. His heart beat fast, mind racing through scenarios of his mom finding out, but it strangely felt nice. Different from the fear that caused his heart to play a rapid rhythm in his chest around Kaken. It made him feel strong, like he could dictate his life for the first time. Moving forward, he felt oddly comfortable in the dark. No one was out to get him. Sure, he was on edge, he would be a fool not to be walking alone at night in Mizudafu of all places, but he was used to that. This was a different on edge, like how his nervousness was a different nervousness than at school, that made him feel normal. Anyone who came after him right now was after him because he was a random pick, not because he was Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless nobody at school who was stupid enough to want to be somebody. With that in mind, found himself at the corner store. He walked in, jumping slightly at the bell that announced his presence, and quickly grabbed what he needed, having memorized the layout years ago. The cashier who checked him out wasn't anyone he recognized. That was good. Back when he first started buying his own supplies, he had been stupid enough to go to the same place multiple times in a row. The cashier who checked him out each time had looked at him pityingly and asked if everything was all right at home. Since then, Izuku was careful to have multiple stores in mind. His mom didn't need anyone thinking she was hurting him. He left as swiftly as he came, remaining aware of every moving shadow on his way back home. Even as he closed his window and took off the hoodie, he kept listening, expecting his mom to come in any minute to ask where he had been. Nothing happened. The clock read 1:14, a bit more than an hour after he had left. Well, at least he killed some time. Izuku sent his application back 2 days later, this time for the general education course. It hurt, but it was his only chance at going to UA now. His late-night escapades didn't stop after that. Now that he knew he could, he began escaping through the window until it was natural to scale the building. He never had a goal in mind during his wanderings, but walking around always seemed to put his mind at ease like little else could. They became so frequent he had developed a pattern around them. Wake up, go to school, do homework, have dinner, have some downtime, go out for a few hours, then go to sleep around 2. It wasn't exactly healthy, per se, but that never stopped him before. It was in his second week of outings that something happened. As he walked past an alley, he heard low voices. All rationale said to leave, but some of the words he heard forced him to stop. "I swear to God, if you make any loud noises, I won't hesitate to kill you." That sentence made Izuku freeze. Whatever was happening, someone was in danger. Someone who couldn't call for help. Someone he could help. It was a stupid notion, but it sounded right to him nonetheless. If he didn't stop whatever was happening, no one else would. Slowly, Izuku crept over to the alley opening, careful not to make a sound. The low voices had continued, and from what he was able to hear, it was some sort of mugging. He peeked around the corner. A young woman in her early 20s had a person slammed against the wall. It was hard to tell the other's gender due to their reptilian head. The woman herself seemed to have some sort of bone quirk. Her fist, which was pressed against the reptilian person's neck, looked like it had brass knuckles, but a closer look told him it was underneath her skin. Okay, bone quirk, Izuku thought. Possibly a transformation-type quirk, but it's also possible that it's a mutant type. Probably a mutant. If she could manipulate her bones, she would have gone for something sharper. I shouldn't need to worry too much about it if it turns out that way, but the transformation could be much more dangerous. There are 2 possible weaknesses if it's a transformation that I can think of right now. Either overuse results in a calcium deficiency, or she only has a set amount of bone to work with, which would mean certain bones would become weaker and less dense as she makes others stronger and changes their shapes. Mutants tend to rely too much on their quirk because it doesn't tire them out as much as others. The only way I'll know for certain is to get her attention. Taking a deep breath, he stepped into the entryway. His eyes were alight with fear and determination as he shouted, "Hey! Leave them alone." Bone Quirk turned her face to look at him, eyes narrowed. She still had her fist pressed up against black, scaly throat. Her eyes seemed to look him up and down before she scoffed. "Isn't it past your bedtime, kid? Go home, this doesn't concern you." Izuku clenched his fists to keep them from shaking. He took a cautious step forward. "I'll leave them alone," he forced out, trying to keep his breathing quiet even as he heard it speed up. His filter failed him and he blurted out, "You're nothing but a bully who's only able to feel powerful by attacking others." His eyes widened and he clamped a hand over his mouth. "Idiot! Think before you speak. Where did that even come from?" The woman growled, letting go of the reptilian's neck and turning to face him fully. "The hell did you just say to me, brat?" The greenette gulped. He saw the reptilian start to slowly inch away, and he decided to say the first thing that came to his mind, just to keep the woman's attention towards him. Shakily he said, "You heard me. You don't have a flashy or necessarily powerful quirk, so you prey on others with more noticeable ones to feel in control, right?" He received no intelligible answer. Instead, she just snarled and ran towards him, fist raised. Yelping, he ducked underneath her first attack with a reaction time built up from years of abuse. Turning quickly, he saw that she had stumbled, having put all her weight into a hit she was sure would connect. Before she had time to rebalance herself, Izuku ran forwards and body-slammed her back, toppling them both over. A loud crack was heard when her head connected to the pavement. Izuku scrambled up, internally panicking. "Did I kill her? I didn't mean to. Oh God, what if I get in trouble? Mom would be so mad and the teachers would hate me even more, and what if it stops me from going to UA or..." His spiraling thoughts were interrupted by a hand on his shoulder. Shouting in surprise, he spun around quickly and threw his hands up to cover his head, scrunching his eyes shut. Easy. I just wanted to thank you. The reptilian, a lizard of some kind? Person eased. You alright? You stood up real quick and started mumbling. You looked out of it. If you're worried about hurting her, she's just knocked out. Izuku cracked an eye open. It was hard to tell with the animalistic features, but he could have sworn there was some worry in those eyes. Slowly he lowered his arms. Yeah, sorry, I do that a lot. He trailed off, laughing nervously. Besides, I should be the one asking that. Are you okay? Yeah, I will be. She followed me home from work. Said I stole her position or something. Oh. Izuku never knew how to keep a conversation going. Was he even supposed to keep one like this going? Do you have a phone or something to call the police with? I don't have mine on me. I'm sorry. Yeah, I got it here. They'll probably want to hear something from you, but the adult paused, looking the greenette up and down. I'm pretty sure you aren't supposed to be out this late. If they ask about it, I'll just say you ran off before I could thank you, okay? Izuku's heart clenched in relief. He hadn't even thought of that. He would have had to explain why he was out, as well as risking his mom finding out. He bowed slightly in thanks. Thank you. I should be going now. Stay safe. And kid? Izuku looked up. Don't do something like this again. Don't get me wrong, I'm thankful, but this sort of thing can be really dangerous if you get into the habit of helping everyone you see. Hero work is too dangerous for someone like you, stupid Deku. You'd probably end up getting yourself killed before you even got your license. The boy lowered his eyes and nodded, turning away so the adult couldn't see him blinking away tears. Someone who didn't even know he was quirkless thought he was too weak to handle himself. He knew it was probably true, but that didn't mean it hurt any less each time he heard it. He used the walk back home to stew in his thoughts. During the fight, if you could call it that, there had been a rush of adrenaline coursing through him. It was the same fear he felt when he was running from Bakugo and his groupies, but toned down. Just present enough to give him an edge in reaction time. It was similar to what he felt when he first started to go out at night. He felt strong, powerful. He liked the fight. That realization made him stutter in his pace. He liked how it made him feel. It wasn't like facing the bullies, it was his own choice, his own rules. What if you did it again? A voice whispered in his mind. What if you actually did something good for once? It's not like vigilantism is illegal for someone like you. They forgot about the weak, quirkless population. They thought no one like you would be stupid enough to risk their lives. Besides, it's almost like they're asking for you to do it. They dashed your hopes, but left a door wide open for you, if you would just step through it. The voice was right. Vigilante laws only ever mentioned quirked individuals. He could still be charged with assault, but it would be worth it, wouldn't it? If he could just save one more person, then maybe he wouldn't be useless. Izuku expertly scaled the building and quietly ducked his way into his room, still thinking. It wasn't as if his routine would change, he could just turn his nightly escapades into something more worthwhile. I'd need to train up a bit, maybe get something to cover my face so the police can't trace me easily. There's that beach I see when I walk to the coast. It's a bit far away, but it has a lot of heavy pieces of trash I could train with. I'd have to leave around a bit earlier than I normally do to get home on time, he started muttering. It could also let me find stuff I'd need. I'm no support student, but I could probably make some metal knee pads and arm guards. That would definitely help with protection since I won't be able to get any actual armor. He made his way over to his desk, where his latest analysis journal was. He ignored it in favor of grabbing one of 2 empty notebooks he had on hand. Flipping to the first open page, he started sketching out ideas. Dagoba Beach was less of a beach and more of a makeshift trash dump. Piles of old electric appliances and broken children's toys lay in heaps, no rhyme or reason to how they were sorted. It was well known among locals that almost everything thrown away in the district would eventually end up on the once beautiful sands of the waterfront. Izuku stared up at the piles of discarded materials. The tallest one, he noticed with dismay, was a good 15 feet high. Even the smallest stood at his waist level. Idly, he wondered how the sands had become so forgotten, It was a beautiful view, he noticed, even with the evidence of the mistreatment of the shore surrounding him. Moonlight glinted off the water, staining the wet sand a silvery color. There was even a small outcropping overlooking the ocean. The greenette started small when cleaning the beach. The first day was used to get a lay of the land, figuring out what he could handle. There wasn't much. He hadn't actively trained his body before. Most of his speed and stamina came from years of running away. He decided to start with the trash farthest from the water, as there were smaller bits and bobs. He grabbed as much as he could carry, using plastic bags he found in the mess to help him take more. The first thing he made note of after he started was the location of dumpsters to throw things in. It was harder than expected. Many of the nearby stores and apartment complexes put locks on the boxes, so he had to be careful where he brought his bags. Despite his setbacks, however, he soon had a system going. Izuku would cautiously take from the top of the piles, making sure to not cut his hands on the sharp pieces of glass that were found scattered about. Then he would sort through it, taking scraps of metal and clothes that could prove useful to his costume designs. All the trash would go into the plastic bags, while his findings would be placed on one of the few open patches of sand. What started as just plastic bags laden with trash soon turned into the chunks of metal that might have been microwaves or ovens at one point. For the larger ones that he couldn't hold in his hands, he would tie a piece of rope around and pull them towards their destination. It was a tiring process. He had to make sure he didn't take on anything that could hurt him and set back his process. There was also the exhausting time spent sorting through the smaller pieces of metal, deciding whether or not he should keep them as materials. There were plenty of mishaps as well. Once, in the beginning, and before he started bringing a flashlight, he almost skewered himself on a sharp pipe he almost hadn't noticed. Thankfully, he caught it last minute. Then there were all the times that, despite his caution, he scraped his hands on various sharp scraps. He had to disinfect the wounds as soon as he got home, worried that they'd become infected and his progress would need to be restarted. By the end of the first month, he deemed himself ready to start putting more of his plan into action. There are 9 months left until the entrance exams for general education. I should probably start patrolling before then, or else I'll have to worry about getting used to it on top of high school, Izuku planned in his head. Maybe I should start within the month? I have all the plans for a disguise drawn out, and it'll take me around a week to actually make the first product. I could use the first month or so to make changes and learn on the job. That's something else I'd have to get used to as well, the rooftops. I'm pretty good at getting up, but I'll need to teach myself to use them for faster travel. With that plan in mind, he got to work. Izuku had easily convinced his mom to take him clothes shopping thanks to the fact he had just hit a growth spurt, not that he was tall by any standards. Along with the various hero merchandise shirts he loved to get, he bought some clothes that fit into his design. When Inko asked about the uncharacteristic purchases, he quickly made up a lie and told he had wanted to test out different fashion, since high school would be a fresh start. Then there were the items he needed to purchase on his own, without his mom seeing. Each night on his way back home from Dagoba Beach, he would walk into a store, a different one each time, and picked out 1 or 2 things from a mental list. He was wary of purchasing too much at a time, as he was paranoid it would somehow be traced back to him. The hardest part of putting the plan together was the homemade equipment. He had managed to find various tools at the beach, which he assumed had been meant for the trash themselves. Despite a bit of rust, however, he found them extremely helpful in furthering his goals. He collected sewing needles, thread, pliers, and various other instruments. 8 days after his decision to start on his vigilante costume, he had his first completed prototype. Despite what some people seem to believe, Inko Midoriya wasn't an idiot. Far from it, in fact. She knew her son's school life wasn't going as well as he claimed it to be. She tried to get him to open up, but each time the subject came up, he merely laughed it off or changed the subject. It scared her if she was honest with herself. Each fake smile Izuku shot her, each slight jump when she called him ingrained in her memory. She felt so helpless. Despite broaching the idea of switching school multiple times, he always shook his head and said he was fine. That wasn't in the forefront of her mind, however. Maybe it was just a mother's eye, but she noticed the changes in Izuku. The first thing she noticed was his disposition. There was a week or so after he received the letter where he seemed like a shell of himself. It made her feel helpless. She had never been able to have that spark of hope Izuku did, and now that he had lost it, she wasn't sure what to do. She tried her best to comfort him. She talked about the upsides of the other courses, tried to show him that there were still options. She listened to every rambling remark, which she noticed with despair were not nearly as common as they had been. Nothing helped. So, to her endless shame, Inko stood back and watched. Watched as Izuku, the light of her life, was pulled into himself. Something unexpected happened on the 10th morning since his dream was shattered. It was subtle, but it was there. A spark of determination lighted within her son's eyes which she had never seen before, not even during one of his common ravings about whatever hero or quirk was on his mind. The slight bags under his eyes, which had become a constant after the letter, didn't fade. If anything, they became slightly more prominent. Despite that, the spark soon became a flame. It grew with each passing day. Inko wasn't sure what had brought it to his eyes, but she was glad for it. Izuku also started smiling more. Real smiles, not the forced ones he always threw her way when she inquired about school. Grins that reminded her of before he was diagnosed quirkless, when he would watch that clip of All Might and say the words, line for line, with the hero. He would ramble on about his favorite topics again, and she would latch on to every word. Each statement he made, I think they really have potential. I hope they rise in popularity a bit. Next Billboard chart announcement made her want to cry because she had her boy back. Another thing was his physical shape. She couldn't help but notice his arms seemed to become a bit stronger each time she hugged him. It was able to be seen when he wore short-sleeved shirts as well. He had bulked up considerably over the course of a month. Nothing over the top, but it was unmistakable. One day, she had decided the kitchen needed a deep clean and had put various objects she had no use for away to be thrown out. She had asked him for help moving boxes. Izuku went to grab one of the heavier ones. Before she could warn him, he had it in his hands and was easily maneuvering towards the front door. Inko stood there, stupefied. She knew for a fact that he would have had trouble with that not too long ago. How had he done that? That was just one interaction that popped out. Izuku was hiding something from her, but it didn't seem bad. She waved it off as typical teenage secrecy, assuming he was embarrassed to tell her he had started to work to get in better shape. Izuku! Inko called to the boy one evening. He looked up from where he was picking at his food. Yeah, Mom? I'm happy for you. She smiled slightly at him. You seem more cheerful recently. I'm glad you aren't letting things get you too down. Izuku blushed slightly, looking away. I guess I've just been thinking of different careers, you know? Everything that happened kinda made me realize there were more ways of helping someone than just being a pro hero. Inko felt tears build in her eyes. She knew she hadn't been the best mother, not when it came to supporting her son. She knew he noticed her incomprehension of his dream. She had tried, but it hurt her to see her boy grow up with a dream that he couldn't achieve, no matter how hard he tried. Right there, right then, Inko made herself a promise. No matter what his goals moving forward, she would be encouraging him every step of the way. It was finally ready. The finished product of his hard work. His mom had to take a late shift at her workplace, which meant he could try on the uniform without worrying about her overhearing anything. Izuku felt his heart beating fast. This was it. He would put it on for the first time, make adjustments, and take it for a test run. He wasn't foolish. He knew it would take some time and a lot of practice to feel comfortable jumping across rooftops. The clothes were quick and easy to put on, just as he planned it. It was time for the final reveal. Izuku took a deep breath and stepped in front of the mirror. Dark gray cargo pants covered his legs. They had 2 large pockets on each leg, placed on the hips and on the sides of his thighs, for extra storage. Metal plating held on by straps that went around his legs protected just above and below his knees. This allowed him free motion of the joint while still protecting the limbs. A simple black belt went around his waist. He had on his favorite pair of vivid red high tops. On top, Izuku had on a black shirt underneath a dark teal sweater. Large, bright red markings, the same shade as his sneakers, reached from his armpits, over his shoulders, and ended at his shoulder blades. The color was also seen on the back of his elbows and down his side. Underneath the hoodie, he had strapped metal guards to his forearms, similar to the ones on his legs. Gray gloves, darker than his pants, covered his hands and wrists. More metal was sewn into them, on the backs of his hands and his knuckles. His face was next. It was the most difficult part of the design to work on, as he needed his sight unimpaired while still covering his identity. In the end, he had chosen a simple, ebony-colored face mask that reached around his head, obscuring his anything below his nose. He had used some concealer to hide away the freckles still visible, as they were an uncommon trait in the area. However, he decided to keep the minor scars on his face uncovered. They weren't incredibly noticeable. The largest one was but a thin line from his hairline to the inside of his left eyebrow, but they did make for a better chance at staying unrecognized. He had bought contacts, scarlet to match the color scheme, from a cosmetic store. They were cheap, but they came in bulk and allowed for more anonymity. He had elected to not dye or otherwise color his hair. It would have been too much trouble to put in and wash out, and he could wear a wig, lest it fall off in a fight. Instead, he had simply hidden it away beneath his sweater's hood, a few forest green curls poking out from underneath. The final part was his tools and weapons. While, for the most part, he decided to go empty-handed, a small knife with a black handle and a Swiss Army knife were both on his belt, both connected to the accessory by clips on their handles. The pocket on his right hip held a small notebook and a pen, while the left held a small first aid kit. The two on his thighs were empty, just in case he needed to bring anything else. Izuku smiled slightly at the look, his reflection's now ruby eyes crinkling upwards. It wasn't a foolproof disguise, but it was him. It didn't look like how he did as a civilian, but he oozed an aura of confidence, however minor, that he hadn't had in a while. It felt right. And that was the thing, wasn't it? Izuku had spent so long cowering away and learning he wasn't wanted, it felt overwhelming to allow himself to finally feel like he was useful, like he was confident, like he was a person, not just a being who just so happened to exist. He realized, looking at his reflection who didn't so much look like him but felt like him, that this is what others at his school must feel every day. That they can step out into the world without worrying about people hating them for tiny things that they can't change. As a testing phase, he went through some basic stretches in the room. As he slowly got used to the maneuverability of the clothes, making small adjustments to the tightness of the metal plating when he noticed they slipped a bit while he hugged his knee to his chest. Most of his calculations seemed to be correct. Checking the time, he saw the clock read 10. It was time to go. Silently, the boy slipped through the window. He'd need to be more careful from now on. If anyone saw him leave dressed as he was, they would eventually make the connection. The street was dark, save for the street lights that stood tall over the pavement. Somewhere, Izuku could hear a dog barking. No one else was around. Breathing out, the greenette smiled. It was the beginning of a new chapter in his life. A yelp, followed shortly by a crash, sounded above the darkened streets. Izuku rolled onto his back from where he had been lying face down on a fire escape, groaning softly. That had not been one of his best moments. He had started out the night by walking a few blocks away from his apartment complex, just to be on the safe side. He had decided to practice his parkour skills in order to be able to use rooftops as a form of transportation, still keeping his ears out for anything that he might need to help with. It was an easy feat to get onto the roofs, but he had miscalculated his first attempt at jumping to the next building. That led him to where he was now, wincing as he poked his left shoulder. "That's gonna leave a bruise," he noted with slight embarrassment. Not even 20 minutes into his first test patrol and he had already managed to get hurt. "Well, at least I didn't fall all the way to the ground. Let's try that again." The greenette pushed himself up, climbing onto the rooftop he had been aiming for. It was flat, like the one he had started on, with a slightly raised surface around the sides. Izuku thought, if he got a running start, he could push off the slight elevation and get more lift. It should be enough to get him past the width of the alley between the two buildings. He backed up, careful to not fall from the opposite edge. Hopping up and down a few times, he psyched himself up for the second attempt. "I'll need to be careful with the landing. I should probably try to roll this first time while I get used to jumping. I can work on landing on my feet later when I've worked up to going one jump after another." Before he could talk himself out of it, Izuku sprinted forward. Just as he reached the ledge, he pushed off with one foot. For the few seconds he was propelled upwards, he let a smile grace his face. It felt like he was flying. All too soon, however, he felt the tug in his chest as gravity pulled him downward. He quickly maneuvered his body, letting one shoulder touch the ground first, rolling onto his back and opposite hip before coming to a stop kneeling on one leg. It was a trick he had noted many heroes used, specifically the underground heroes that he could find videos of online. Presumably, it was part of their training. Izuku breathed out, closing his eyes and trying to calm his racing heart. It was a step forward, but he needed to stay focused. He needed to be able to do that as many times as required without thinking about it. Rising to his feet once more, Izuku readied himself for the next jump. The gap was smaller than the one before, so he'd need to consider that as he went. Running forward, he repeated the motions he had just done. Now that he knew how to do it correctly, it was much easier to flow his movements together. It felt natural. He continued practicing on different buildings until he was sweating heavily, at which point he swung his legs over the edge of the roof he was on, watching the street. His back was bruised from his less exact landings. He wasn't sure what time it was, note to self, bring a watch next time, but he estimated about 2 hours had passed since he left home. Let's see, he started mumbling to himself. I think I've gotten a hang of jumping this way, or at least as good as I'm going to get in one night. I don't normally get back home until about 2 o'clock, and I think it's about midnight now. That means I can start practicing doing multiple leaps without stopping in between. I'll need to know that for the future. Maybe I can dash. Izuku's quiet musings were cut off when he heard a loud bang. His head snapped up, turning in the direction the noise had come from. Or I can learn on the job. With that thought, the greenette took off. Feeling a wave of adrenaline wash over him as he went, he bounded over the edge and over to the next building. He stumbled as he landed on his feet, but didn't slow down. Another crash came from the same direction. He sped up, heart doing the same. He stopped on a building looking over a dead-end alleyway. It was occupied by 3 figures, one of which was pressed up against the back wall, curled in a tight ball. The second, a boy with long porcupine quills instead of hair, stood over them threateningly. The last, a second assailant, Izuku guessed, watched from a few feet back. They all seemed about his age, maybe older. Think before you join the situation. What are their quirks? Izuku muttered to himself. That boy has porcupine quills. Can he shoot them at will, or does he have to be in close range? Either way, I need to be careful about getting too close. I think I read something about them being barbed, which would make them harder to pull out. The other one doesn't have a mutation, so it's either an emitter or transformation quirk. I'll need to get him to use it to analyze it at all. The one standing over the first said something the greenette couldn't hear. The person curled in on herself, a girl, snapped her head up and shook it vehemently. The boy who had spoken first didn't like the answer and slapped her across the cheek. That was enough for Izuku to climb down quietly, hoping to sneak up. That wasn't what happened, however. His eyes had connected with the girl's, the latter's widening slightly. The partner in crime picked up on it, looked toward the entryway where the vigilante had landed. He called over to his friend, "Hey Michi, we've got company." Porcupine turned, eyes narrowing when they landed on Izuku. "You didn't see anything, got it? Remember Izuku, distract them. Do what you did last time. Let yourself say the first thing that comes to mind." That threw that woman off. Aloud, the boy replied, "Sorry, but I don't think I can do that." "Oh yeah? Taishiro, you deal with him while I finish up my little chat over here." The second boy, Taishiro, nodded. Looking Izuku up and down, he grinned. "Tell you what, short stack. If you're out of here in 5 seconds, I won't go after you. How does that sound?" Izuku pretended to think it over. "I don't think I like that idea." His opponent growled before raising one hand, open and facing the greenette. The other one was holding the forearm of the extended limb like a brace. Izuku ready to jump out of the way, but before he could a blinding light shot out of the palm. He instinctively scrunched his eyes shut. While he was still unaware, a fist uppercut hit him in the gut. Keeling over in sudden pain, Izuku's eyes shot open once more and he brought a hand to where he had been hit. He didn't have time to recover before another punch connected with his chin. He staggered, still somehow managing to remain standing. Before another attack could meet, he charged forward and punched Taishiro in the throat. The boy stumbled backward. A choking noise came from him and he started coughing uncontrollably. Using the distraction, Izuku got close again and jammed his elbow into the older teen's nose. A small crack was heard, and the light conjurer howled in pain. He brought a hand up to his face, swinging blindly with the other. Izuku jumped back to avoid being hit. "You bastard! You broke my DMN nose," Taishiro shouted. "How the hell am I gonna explain this to my parents?" "Same way you can explain what you were doing here to the police," Izuku quipped. "I'm pretty sure attacking someone unprovoked in an alley is kinda illegal, even if you are a minor." With that, he ducked under the boy's arms and threw his whole weight into a tackle. They fell to the ground, Izuku on Taishiro's chest. With one last punch to the head, the bully was knocked out. The greenette stood up and looked over to where Porcupineichi was standing, still looming over the girl. He turned when he heard footsteps approaching. However, he had no time to dodge the incoming kick to the gut. He fell to his hands and knees, but quickly scrambled back up and grabbed a quill with one hand. It dislodged from his scalp easily. He swung it towards Izuku, yelling, "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who doesn't like bullies," the vigilante responded, hopping back. "Okay, need to be careful with that. I should aim for his chest so I don't run the risk of getting one of those stuck in my hand." Michi again went to swipe with the quill, but only hit air. Izuku punched him in the jaw, snapping his head back and sending the teen sprawling on the ground. He delivered a quick kick to the same place he hit Taishiro, effectively forcing him unconscious. He turned to the girl, who was staring at him with wide eyes. Her sclerae were black, a contrast to the white of her irises. Izuku held out a hand. "You okay?" The girl took it and pulled herself up. Despite 2 bruises quickly forming on her cheek and around her eye, she gave him a watery smile. "I will be. Thank you." Izuku nodded, understanding the feeling. "That's good. Do you have a phone to call the police?" "No, but I live right over there." She pointed to the other side of the road. "I'll call them when I get inside." "Sounds like a plan. I should get going as well." Not even waiting for a reply, the greenette skillfully climbed back to the roof. As soon as he was out of sight, he fell to a sitting position and let out a breath. He closed his eyes, leaning back on his hands and tilting his face to the sky. "That was scary. I wasn't really expecting that light quirk. I wonder if he can manipulate it, or if it's just like a switch he can turn on and off. Can he control the output? That would be useful as a flashlight or something." He opened his eyes back up, pulling out the notebook and pencil from his pocket. The cover, a teal similar to his sweater, was labeled Quirk Analysis Volume. He opened the book and started his first 2 entries on the aggressors. "I wish I was able to draw out the fight a bit more. It would have been interesting to see how they implemented their quirks. They didn't seem the brightest, though, so I'm not sure how much they've experimented with them. At least that girl is safe. But what if those guys wake up before the police arrive? I should get a rope or something for next time." He started mumbling to himself about the 2 quirks, theorizing possible additional uses. When he was done, he decided to head home. He hadn't planned to stop any crime, only to practice his roof hopping. Izuku used the rooftops. It was surprisingly easier now that he knew he could do it, running to the scene of the last crime. He found his way back home and opened the window, sliding through. Taking off the uniform was as easy as putting it on, and soon he was in bed. He was asleep before his head hit the pillow. Izuku trudged to school, sore from the prior night's events. He had ended up with a bruised stomach, shoulder, back, and cheek, the last of which he covered with concealer. The rest of the blemishes were covered by his clothes. It was nerve-wracking, walking around after what he had done. He felt like everyone was staring. What if the police asked the girl about him? What if they found out it made him stop before he had fully started? There were so many ways everything could blow up in his face despite all the planning he took to hide his identity. When he got to the classroom, mind still laden with worries, he quietly sat at his desk and laid his arms and chin on the top of the piece of furniture. He stared straight ahead, forcing his mind to focus on what was happening as he waited for the school day to commence. "Oi, Deku the F, are you looking at?" The boy in question jumped. Realizing he had been staring off into space, he zoned back in and noticed where he was looking. "Oh, the Kakin. I'm sorry," he stuttered out, not entirely sure what he was apologizing for. I didn't mean to." The angry blonde stared at him a few seconds before scoffing. "Whatever. Just stop watching me, demon stalker." Izuku quickly looked away and hunched into himself slightly, not wanting to set him off. He didn't need more bruises, or worse, an explosion wound he would have to treat, to add to what he gained the night before. The day was unnervingly normal. Taunts were directed at him. The teachers looked the other way whenever someone antagonized him. He had his lunch destroyed. An average day in the life of Izuku Midoriya. Despite that, the Greenette remained on higher alert than normal. For what? He wasn't sure. For someone to call him out? He knew that wasn't likely. The part of Mizudafu they lived wasn't the best place, and night attacks on unsuspecting victims were the norm. No one would be talking about it. It didn't stop the voice in his head, always whispering his insecurities, from saying, "They'll all find out eventually." What then? Izuku realized he didn't have an answer to that. Tsukachi glared at the report that had been filed with the police department that morning. A girl had been attacked by two peers near midnight, only to be saved by a stranger in a hoodie. It wasn't unheard of to hear of people helping out when they saw a crime, but it was a lot rarer for them to disappear afterward without giving out any info. On top of that, there had been an assault charge a month ago where the man who was attacked, a doctor with a reptilian mutation quirk, had claimed the one who helped him ran off in a similar matter. There was no solid evidence connecting the two, but something in the detective's gut told him there was more to it than there seemed. There was also the fact that the girl who filed a report noted he was wearing a mask and some sort of legs guards. The only cases he had been on that sounded similar had been. He groaned, leaning back in his seat and massaging his eyes with his palms. He had dealt with vigilantes before. They were always a pain to catch, even if they had been on the streets for months. And this was the first time a person matching the description listed on the paperwork had been spotted, which meant they had only been on the scene for a short time. Tsukachi pleaded silently for his gut to be wrong, that this was just a one-off instance. His pleas were not answered. "I'm not the best at social interaction, but I think it's kinda rude to try to stab someone with a knife," Izuku called. The man he was talking to whirled around, suddenly forgetting about the person he had been threatening. As soon as his violet eyes locked on the Greenette, they widened slightly and flickered yellow. He mumbled under his breath, "Sheet, it's Watcher." That was the name people had come up with for him. It was a bit of an oversight on his part to not make one himself, but Watcher worked just as well. He guessed it had started because of his preference to observe a criminal's quirk before attacking, along with his tendency to pick up on small, near unnoticeable clues to weaknesses. "Izuku, no," Watcher mock bowed when he heard it. "The one and only. So, are we going to do this the easy way, or the fun way?" The knife thrown towards him was answer enough. He ducked, making note that the man had pulled another one out. "Oh, your eyes are red now. So they can change colors? Is that all they can do? I wonder if that counts as a mutant or a transformation quirk. If you can control it, it would probably be classified as transformation," Watcher rambled. As he did so, he jumped onto a nearby dumpster and flipped to be right behind the man, a move he had learned recently. Although they seem to change with your emotions. Yellow for unease, red for anger, and so on, right? That would probably count as a mutant quirk then. Cool, but not useful in combat settings. "Shut the F up, you be," the criminal shouted. He whipped his head to face Watcher, only to turn right into a fist. That's no way to talk to a kid, you know. With one last hit to the guy's neck, the fight was finished. The vigilante quickly took some zip ties that he had begun to bring on patrol and bound his hands and ankles. It was a note he made on his first night to bring something to keep them from running away, and it had come in handy many times. Izuku stepped back from the unconscious man, who he had just tied up. He had been about to kill a middle-aged man, but the vigilante had quickly put a stop to that. A lot had changed in the past month. Watcher had started patrolling nightly, making sure to have multiple routes so the police wouldn't catch on to a pattern. Despite his late nights, his schoolwork never worsened. If anything, it had slightly improved due to the fact that the Greenet had realized he could implement various topics into his patrol. Using mathematics and science to plan attacks and combat quirks was the one he used regularly. His skills had improved tremendously in the given time. He had picked up fighting skills for obvious reasons, his stamina was through the roof, and he felt that he was even stronger than he had been starting. His reaction time had already been good, but he had become more in tune with his surroundings. Fewer hits landed against him, more of his own connected. The same couldn't be said for Izuku's school life. Kaken and the other kids still tormented him endlessly. Teachers still ignored the verbal, sometimes even physical, abuse thrown at him during class. He still rarely managed to eat lunch. 8 more months, he reminded himself, 8 more months and you won't have to deal with most of them. He chided himself at getting his hopes up. Sure, very few of them actually had a chance of getting into UA, if he even somehow got in himself, but there would be new kids to fill their place. The worst part about going up a school was that first years were free targets for everyone, and his middle name might as well be Quirk Practice. When Izuku was one of the older kids, only people in his grade were allowed violent. When he was younger than the majority of the student body, he wasn't safe from anyone. That was just how the school hierarchy worked. The Greenet shuddered just thinking about the torment he went through in his first year of junior high. That was off topic. The point was he had been becoming a well-known figure in the community. He had even heard kids talking about his vigilante persona at school once or twice. Izuku grinned. While he wasn't doing it to get recognition, far from it, the whispers showed him he was making a difference. That people could continue to be happy, to smile another day because of him. And that meant everything. For the most part, Aizawa was glad he had expelled his class. They were rude, pretentious, and worst of all they had zero potential for becoming heroes. If they had been allowed to continue in the hero course, they would have died before they ever really got started. He couldn't, in good conscience, allow them to do that. Not after what happened in his second year as a student at UA. Right now, however, he wished he had students. At least then he wouldn't have to deal with a case like this. Tsukachi had called him in to talk about a problem the police had been having for the past month. The detective hadn't specified what type of problem, but Aizawa could guess based on his resigned voice. A DMN vigilante. It wasn't his first time working on one, which he guessed is why Tsukachi called him in. He didn't know what to expect besides that. It wasn't a part of Mizutofu he worked in, and whoever the vigilante was had managed to keep a low radar when it came to major news outlets. Which is why he found himself in a police station he had never been in, scanning the crowd of officers for who had called him. When he spotted the man, he made his way through the crowd, ignoring the confused stares he received from some of the police. Eraserhead, Tsukachi greeted, smiling slightly. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Aizawa nodded in reply. What's this case you wanted me on? The detective dropped his smile, seemingly aging 5 years in a span of a second. Come with me, I'll show you what we have on him. They moved into an office at the back of the station, Tsukachi walking over to the desk in the middle. He picked up a thin file from the top and handed it to Aizawa. This is all we have. Most of it is just eyewitness statements, as well as a few officers' incident reports from when they've met him. No solid leads as of yet. The underground hero opened the manila folder. The first thing he saw was an eyewitness black and white sketch drawn from the elbow up. The vigilante had a dark sweater with lighter highlights on his. Tsukachi had been using masculine pronouns, shoulders. Dark hair poked out from under the hood. There was a face mask hiding the lower portion of his face. The next couple of papers were still images from security cameras. One showed the vigilante facing away from the camera, hand outstretched towards a girl who had been huddled at the back of the alley they were in. The other was a storefront. At the top of the photo, a figure in a teal and red sweater was sitting on the edge of a second-story window. He was first sighted about a month back, which is where that first security footage still is from. Tsukachi explained, from what we can tell, he hasn't had any official training. He's been able to take down some guys we've been looking for a while despite that. Just last night he took down Koshiro Hayashida, who's wanted for multiple accounts of murder, attempted murder, and he has possible ties to a nearby gang. Humming in acknowledgement, Aizawa continued to flip through the pages. The last one was a list of accumulated facts and theories from witnesses to the vigilante. Before reading it, he looked up and asked, "Does this vigilante have a name yet?" Everyone on the street's been calling him Watcher. Not the most original, but that's street thugs for you. He's been spotted observing a scene for minutes by the victims before starting a fight, and then he'll stay on the rooftops nearby for a while after, just staring. There's a few who claim they've seen writing in a notebook before and after the fight, but no one's gotten a good enough look at it. Analyzing, probably. No solo worker would go into a fight without knowing what they're getting into first, the erasure hero guessed. Why did you call me in? Vigilantes are annoying, but the police are usually able to handle them themselves. A few reasons, Tsukachi started. 1. You've dealt with vigilantes before, which not many heroes we have on call are able to say. 2. I know you expelled your class already this year. I'm willing to bet you're getting bored without anyone to teach or any large cases to take on. Lastly, the detective trailed off, looking at the paper in Aizawa's hand. Lastly, you're good with kids. Oh no. He looked down at the last page he had yet to read. There, written as one of the first facts, read teenager. Estimated to be in the first or second year of high school. The underground hero felt his eye twitch slightly. It was one thing to have a vigilante. It was another to not have any leads. It was a completely different headache to have a minor committing acts of vigilante justice. If he was in high school, he must have failed to gain entrance to a hero course and decided to turn to vigilantism as a plan B. Aizawa had heard of teens who had done similar things. 9 times out of 10, they were the type of people to want a hero license only because it meant they could have fewer restrictions on their quirk and picked fights with criminals for fun, not because they thought it was the right thing to do. It was unlikely this boy was any different. I'll look over this tonight, Aizawa decided. I can take these home, correct? Tsukachi nodded. We have our own copies of everything in there. I've already contacted your agency saying that you're following a case for us, and they've switched your routes with another underground hero who tends to patrol around here. Your normal hours are the same time as when Watcher is normally spotted, so you won't have to worry about that. You know my number if anything comes up. Aizawa nodded, slipping the papers back into the folder. He wasn't anywhere awake enough to look at the case in depth, and he knew he would want to sleep off the migraine that was already forming. I'll be going then. Even if I don't have students, Nizu says he likes to have me on hand if anything comes up. Thank you, Aizawa. I know you're not the biggest fan of this type of case. God knows I'm not either. With that, they parted ways. Tsukachi went to talk to a couple of officers, while Aizawa strolled out the station. It was too far from UA to walk, and so he angled himself for the nearest railway terminal. It was only after the hero was on the train that he realized the detective never said anything about a quirk. When Hizashi came home from UA, he wasn't sure what to expect. Shoyuta had left early in the school day to pick up files for a new case from a detective he had worked with before. When he had gotten back, he had been in such a foul mood that the loud blonde told him to go home and rest. The strangest part was that his husband listened. As in there was absolutely no fuss when Hizashi told him to take care of himself. That never happened. What he wasn't expecting was to open the door to find the black-haired man sitting at the table, glaring at the papers spread out before him so hard that the voice hero wondered if he was trying to activate his quirk. "Sho? What's wrong?" he asked. He kicked off his boots and started removing his directional speaker. "You look like you're about to expel a whole class again." Shoyuta looked up, eyes softening slightly when he did so. Just as quickly, however, he closed them and leaned back in his seat, groaning loudly. "It's the DMN case Tsukachi asked me to take up. A vigilante." Hizashi winced in sympathy. He hadn't had nearly as much interaction with vigilantes as Shoyuta had, but he knew how complicated the cases always were. Very few of them ever stayed vigilantes, either disappearing before the police could find out their identity or crossing the line into villainy. He walked over to where the other man was, one hand on the back of his husband's chair and the other on the table, and leaned over, eyes shifting across the papers. He shifted, picking one up and staring at the sketch drawn out. "They look young." The insomniac didn't say anything, just picked up another sheet and held it up for Hizashi to take. It was a photocopy of police notes, detailing eyewitness testimonies and points that multiple people noted. Name: Watcher, alias, civilian name unknown. Charges: vigilantism, active 1 month. Possible assault charges. Age: teenager. Estimated to be in the first or second year of high school. SEC: male, although is noted to have a higher voice, see age estimation. Height: below average, EST of about 154 centimeters. Physical description: dark hair, various witnesses suggest a blue or green tint, though nothing has been confirmed. Red eyes, white. Identifying scar on forehead, between eyebrows. Thin, unknown, clothes obscure frame. General description: confident, often throwing opponents off with commentary. Noted to be gentle with victims of crimes, some claim to have been provided with. Minor first aid when needed. Prefers hand-to-hand combat, but had made use of various objects found at the scene. Quirk: unknown. Possible quirks: slight enhancement, intelligence, minor foresight, teleportation, least likely, slight healing, enhanced pain tolerance. Note: this file is unfinished. It will be updated as more facts arise. They really don't know anything, do they? Hisashi muttered under his breath. It wasn't even the bare essentials. They didn't even have any solid knowledge of a quirk. That's what's annoying me so much, Shoyuta said. They have nothing but things that anyone could see. And they expect me to be able to catch him. On top of that, most teens who turn to vigilantism, however few of them there may be, are those who failed to be admitted to a hero course. Which means he's most likely either a spoiled brat with no potential and thinks he's higher than the law, or someone who's been hurt by hero society enough that he won't trust any hero that tries to go up to him. The voice hero paused, thinking. Do you think he might have a quirk seen as villainous? We both know how Hitoshi was treated back in foster care because of it, and some of the smaller hero schools refuse to admit people like that. Their newly adopted son, who was probably in his room doing homework, had a bad experience in the system. The only reason they had managed to take him out of it and place him in their care was that Shoyuta had happened to be in the right place to catch the father of the foster family punching Hitoshi in the face. They had taken the boy in, understanding what it felt like to be judged for a quirk they couldn't change, Shoyuta for his own, villainous quirk and Hisashi for his poor control as a young child. Sighing, Shoyuta straightened in his chair. It crossed my mind, but I'm not sure that's the case. I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Of course, there's also the possibility he has a mutation quirk he hides while patrolling. There's some people who discriminate against those with quirks they don't like the look of. They stayed in silence for a minute, both thinking of the mess that the next few weeks, possibly months, were going to be. That is until Hisashi clapped his hand loudly and shouted, "Well, I know what's going to happen now. You're going to take a break before you try to murder someone, most likely me. I'm going to get changed and grab Hitoshi, and then we'll all go down to that cat cafe you two like so much. I don't suppose I can stop you?" The blonde grinned widely. Nope. It wasn't until a week later that Eraserhead actually saw the infamous vigilante. He had been on one of his new patrol routes when his eyes were drawn to a broken window of a small jewelry shop across the street. Noise from inside suggested an intruder. Dropping down to the street level, the underground hero silently crossed the street, pressed his back to the bricks of the building, and peered into the window next to him. 3 men, 2 holding guns and 1 breaking the glass cases, stood inside. One of the gun wielders was standing at the back alongside the person actively stealing, while the last stood near the front, not 5 feet away from Eraserhead. One has a mutation, I should go for him first. Seems like a constant strength enhancer. I shouldn't need to worry about the others too much. If I make a noise out here, I can lead the mutant outside, hopefully alone, and what was that? A bit of movement out of the corner of his vision had the hero snapping his head towards the other side of the road, to the roof he had just been on. A figure was standing there, bright red highlights on their sweater standing out against the dark backdrop. Watcher. True to his name, the vigilante seemed to be staring intently at the robbers. Eraserhead idly wondered if his quirk was some sort of sight enhancer. Before he could theorize more, the teen shifted slightly and their eyes met. Watcher froze for a split second before running off. The hero cursed. The active robbery was important, but he had a chance to take down the vigilante quickly. One of the two cases was more likely to drag on than the other. After a moment's hesitation, the hero noiselessly took off in the direction the young teen went, pulling out his phone and calling Tsukachi. He knew the police could handle the crooks. As soon as the detective picked up, Eraserhead told him, "I'm in pursuit of Watcher. There's a robbery at a jewelry store on Shinko and Yum. Are there any officers nearby that can respond? I can send out an alert. There should be someone a few blocks away now. Be careful, Eraser. Watcher is tricky." The hero didn't wait before ended the call and speeding up. He was still on street level, but he could see Watcher on a rooftop ahead. Thinking quick, he shot out his capture scarf, wrapping it around a street light and boosting himself up. He repeated the motion and rolled onto the top of a building that the vigilante had just cleared. I see what they meant by enhancement quirk, Eraserhead thought. The brat was giving him a run for his money. With that, he picked himself up and sprinted after the vigilante. It started as a normal patrol. Watcher stopped a few muggings, helped a drunk group of university students back their apartment, and even stopped to pet a cat he had found wandering around. Nothing prepared him for how it was going to turn out. He had been heading home when he heard a noise. It wasn't anything loud, but enough for him to go slightly off course and check it out. There, in a jewelry shop, was 3 men. 2 were armed. The other one was taking the jewelry from destroyed glass cases. He had dealt with corner store robberies once or twice before, but those only ever had one perpetrator. As he assessed the situation from across the street, he caught movement right outside the store. There was a man outside that Watcher hadn't noticed before, despite having a clear view of the storefront. The man, clad in black and a white scarf around his neck, was a hero. One he recognized from his hero analysis research online. Eraserhead. The Eraserhead. And the hero was staring straight back at him. "What do I do?" Watcher panicked. "I should run." "Yep, definitely time to run." "Not today, Satan." He would have laughed at his panicked thoughts if his heart wasn't trying to beat a hole through his chest. As it were, Watcher turned and fled, trying to create distance between himself and the hero. The sudden spike of adrenaline shot him forward with a speed he didn't realize he had. He looked behind him, only to see that Eraserhead had chosen to go after him. He had a hand to his ear, probably alerting someone of the ongoing robbery. The sight made Watcher turn his head back around and accelerate even more, legs beginning to feel numb as they repetitively pounded against the buildings. Only a few seconds later he heard a thud behind him, warning him that the hero had begun to catch up. He whipped his head around once more to see the man's eyes glowing red, hair levitating as he ran. Izuku's breathing started to speed up not just from exhaustion but also fear. Not the type that he felt in a fight, that made him alert enough to notice details, but the kind where he knew he was about to have another burn to hide from his mom. The type that made him feel so useless, where his vision got blurry and all he wanted to do was curl into a ball and cry. "He's going to catch you," the dark voice in his head whispered. "He'll catch you and you'll never be able to save anyone again. Or worse, they'll lock you up and throw away the key because they'll realize you're some freak who can't do something as simple as getting a quirk. Mom will hate you just like they all do. She'll finally find out how much of a disappointment you really are." Izuku was so preoccupied with trying to silence the twisting thoughts that he hadn't realized he was supposed to jump to the next roof. He tried to slow down, but it resulted in him stumbling and careening over the edge. His heart lurched in his chest and his stomach dropped. He felt gravity pull him down. Something wrapped around his wrist, bringing him to a split-second halt after falling a story and making him slam into the side of the building. He felt something pop in his shoulder before a burning pain shot through his entire arm. He bit down a scream, instead letting out a high-pitched, distress-filled whine. Black static filled his vision. Then the force was pulling him up. Whatever it was that caught him also wrapped around his waist, providing more security. Izuku looked down, realizing through his pain-induced haze that it was Eraserhead's capture weapon. When he was set back on the top of the roof, he collapsed on his unharmed hand and knees, panting heavily. The material around his wrist, which he had pulled close to his chest, let go. The part wrapped around his waist was still there. Your wrist was the first thing I could wrap around, Eraserhead stated in a monotone voice. Izuku guessed it was his form of apology. Izuku didn't respond, only shifted his weight into a kneeling position. He kept his head angled down slightly, choosing a spot on the man's shoes to stare at instead of his face. His breathing was starting to slow down ever so slightly, but his shoulders still burned and his heart rate spiked with every slight movement or noise. He flinched when the boots started moving, the man taking a step towards him. They paused as if the man saw it and actually cared that Izuku was scared, despite him being both a vigilante and a quirkless nobody. The hero squatted down, forearms resting on his thighs. He whispered lowly, "Can I take a look at your arm? It's probably been dislocated." Izuku started trembling. He suddenly felt overheated. This was some sort of trap. Eraserhead still had his scarf around his waist, and he was looking for an opening to bring him in. "Think, idiot. You can panic later. What do you have on you?" "First aid kit, a pencil, your analysis book, zip ties, knife, Swiss Army knife. That's it. Nothing that can help, the knife won't cut through the cloth." "What can I do? What can I do? What can I?" His breathing picked up again, and he started tugging at the capture scarf with his good hand. He needed to get out, away, anywhere. Fingernails dug into skin as he tightly held a length of it, digging in so forcefully it drew blood. "Hey now, no need for that," Izuku heard distantly. They were words, he knew, but his muddled mind couldn't decipher what they meant. Instead, he started tugging harder, unintentionally pushing his nails deeper into his skin. The weapon loosened its hold, pulling away. Izuku scrambled to his feet, bolting in the first direction he saw, right into Eraserhead. The man, seemingly not expecting the mad dash toward him, fell to his butt from where he had still been squatting. The teen didn't fully perceive that fact, too busy picking up speed. He leaped to the next rooftop, and the next, before dropping into an alleyway. He continued zigzagging through the small spaces between buildings, trying to keep out of sight. The path wasn't a familiar one, and he had no idea where he was going, just that there was a destination. Until, that is, he reached a park. He didn't slow down until he reached the small tree cover. He grabbed a branch of one and climbed up, ignoring the throbbing shoulder, sending jolts of heat and agony as he did so. With his back against the trunk and legs curled to his chest, he went limp. It was hidden. It was safe. He was safe. For an eternity, Izuku sat there, trying to get his body back under his control. Slowly, his breathing calmed, his heartbeat slowed, and the tears on his cheeks, when had he started crying, dried. When the white-hot terror left him, a frozen feeling seeped into his bones. He was tired, so tired, but he couldn't go to sleep, not in the park. His mother would wake up to find him gone, and then what would he do? Trembling with exhaustion, Izuku pushed himself off the tree and back to the ground. It was hard to keep upright, but he made his way out of the park, which he realized distantly was the one he used to play in as a kid. It was near his apartment. The greenette knew he shouldn't walk on the streets while in uniform, but he couldn't find it in himself to care. He felt numb. No one noticed him. Not when he passed through his neighborhood, not when he opened his window to slip in. It was hard to climb up with a hurt arm, but he managed. The boy flopped onto his bed, not bothering to put on pajamas. Instead, he wiggled under the covers, curling into the soft fabrics. His sleep was plagued with nightmares. Eraserhead thought he knew what would happen when he chased down Watcher. The teen would run for a bit, but in the end, decide to face him. Best case scenario, the hero would take him down and he and Tsukachi could sleep peacefully. Worst case, the vigilante would escape, either disappearing from the streets or coming back to be taken down another day. Neither of these things happened. He ran after Watcher, activating his quirk along the. The vigilante didn't slow down or stumble. He's not enhancing his speed or anything then. As soon as he got close enough, Eraserhead prepared his capture weapon to catch the teen. Waiting until Watcher jumped to the next building, he planned to grab him midair. However, the leap never came. Instead, the boy fell off the roof, unable to catch himself last minute. Eraserhead's heart leaped as he saw Watcher disappear off the edge, shooting out an end of his capture weapon to catch him mid-fall. As soon as he felt it wrap around something, he pulled it tight. A pain-infused noise came from the other end. The underground hero heard a slam right afterward. Sheet, did I catch him in time? He sent the other end out. Not being able to see over the edge left him guessing, but he tried to wrap it around Watcher's waist to provide more stability. Slowly he heaved the boy up. The vigilante fell to his knees and one hand, the other curled into his chest. Eraserhead realized that was how he had been caught. He quickly unwrapped the appendage. The boy was breathing heavily, probably from the shock of falling. It's probably dislocated, he stopped pretty quickly. Aloud, he explained apologetically, your wrist was the first thing I could wrap around. There was no response, but the boy moved into a kneeling position. His face was angled downwards, bangs obscuring his eyes. Eraserhead took a step forward, trying to get a better look at the hurt arm. He froze when Watcher flinched at the sudden movement. No getting close then. I can work with that, the hero thought. He squatted, careful to keep his hands relaxed and visible to the vigilante. The scarf around his waist still encircled the boy. Eraserhead was worried he might fall over the edge again, or try to run away. He made sure his voice was calm and quiet, like talking to a cornered animal, when he asked, "Can I take a look at your arm? It's probably been dislocated." It had the opposite effect than anticipated. Watcher began to tremble slightly, breathing escalating. He curled into himself slightly, tugging at the capturing weapon surrounding his torso. A wave of concern shot through the hero when he noticed blood coming from where his nails connected with skin. "Hey now, no need for that," he tried to soothe. It again only made the boy antsier, grip tightening and drawing more blood. In a split-second decision, Eraserhead released Watcher. The vigilante seemed to be panicking over the restraints. Just like everything else that had happened that night, the hero didn't expect Watcher to barrel straight into him at full speed, knocking him to the ground. By the time he turned around, the vigilante had somehow managed to put a building in between them. Eraserhead gave chase, but soon lost sight of the teen. It was dark and not even the bright red markings of the hoodie could stand out. The hero sighed, slowing to a halt. He tried to think about what could have elicited such a panic from Watcher. It was something deeper than just a fear of being caught, that much was certain. The teen had looked like he thought he was about to die. As soon as Izuku walked into the kitchen, Inko knew something was wrong. The first sign was how early he was up. It was a Sunday, which meant no school and no optional Saturday classes. It was rare for him to get up until she called him in for breakfast, which was still being made. She also noticed how the life in his eyes was dull, not unlike the week following the UA letter, and he silently made his way to his seat at the dining table. He was rubbing his left shoulder with his other hand, grimacing in discomfort. "Morning, Izuku," she said. When all she got in response was a quiet nod, she asked, "Is everything okay? Sleep all right?" He shook his head. "I had some weird dreams, and I think I messed up my shoulder yesterday," he responded quietly before adding, "It feels better now, but it's still annoying. I might put an ice pack after breakfast." Inko frowned. He seemed fine last night, but she also knew he was better at hiding things than she would like. "How did that happen?" Izuku froze almost imperceptibly. "Almost. I tripped on my way home from class. You know those steps in the park?" That was a lie. Inko didn't need to notice the hesitance to know that. Still, they've done the same song and dance for years, and she knew he would close off if she pushed. Instead, she said, "I have a friend who has a lot of those pre-Quirk-era movies you like on DVD. I was thinking of borrowing one and having a movie night. We haven't done that in a while." The boy finally perked up, albeit only slightly. That was all the confirmation Inko needed. "In that case, I'll text her and go out to get snacks this afternoon." By then, breakfast was ready. Inko dished the food up and placed 2 bowls, one of rice and one of miso soup, in front of her son before preparing her own. Izuku gulped down the food like he hadn't eaten in days, using his hurt arm sparingly, she noticed. After breakfast, Izuku returned to his room. When Inko knocked on his door to ask what snack he wanted for the movie, she was met with snoring from the other side. Normally, she would prefer that he kept a somewhat normal sleeping schedule, but he had looked like he needed it. Almost as soon as he woke up, not long after Inko had left, Izuku got to work on a plan that had been in his mind since he woke up. He first went to the kitchen and grabbed an ice pack from the freezer, pressing it against his recently set shoulder. Making his way back to his room, he opened his closet. He had shoved his uniform haphazardly there when he woke up and realized he never changed. He cleaned it up, hiding it in its usual place, the bottom drawer of his desk. Okay, so maybe it wasn't the best place to put it, but he knew his mom never touched it, believing he only stored his finished analysis books there. He took out his patrol journal and one of his older hero analysis for the future notebook, setting them on the desk. He flipped through the finished notebook to a specific hero. A face he saw the night before stared back at him. A sketch of Eraserhead drawn as crudely as only an 8-year-old sketch could be. It was from a time back when Izuku was obsessed with researching underground heroes, searching through every hero analysis website and blog he could find for the rare videos of the, mostly, night-prowling heroes. Back then, Eraserhead was relatively new on the scene, but there were still 2 or 3 clips of him fighting. The notes, while many no longer useful, now that Izuku had seen the hero fight firsthand, were a good starting point for the entry he was about to start. Everything's kinda blurry, but I know he decided chasing me took priority over the robbery he was staking out, which means he knows who I am and had most likely been asked to be on my case, he thought, which means I'll have to expect to see him a lot more from now on. He started with filling half a page with a full-body sketch of the man, silently noticing the updates in his uniform. Not much had changed, but the goggles that he had now better obscured anyone trying to tell where he was looking, and he had gotten rid of the fingerless gloves he once wore. From there, he started the analysis of his quirk. I don't need to worry about it for obvious reasons, but being quirkless is rare nowadays, especially in Japan. I should fake being affected by erasure so they don't figure that out. The activation is incredibly noticeable, even without seeing his eyes, so as long as I pay attention I could slow down or look confused when I see his hair go up. Why does he even have long hair? Aesthetic? It would be much easier to take people by surprise if his hair didn't defy gravity every time he activated his quirk. He should know, Izuku, focus, you need to make a plan. From what I remember of the videos, I should look those up again. Erasure stops when he blinks, but he also can stare for much longer than average. He started mumbling as he wrote, not realizing he was speaking aloud. Maybe I should pretend to have a mental quirk or something. I can't remember last night very well, but I think he used it when I was running. He's most likely written out the possibility of me having a physical enhancer, so I won't be able to get away with that. I haven't seen a video of him fighting in years, but he'll definitely have gotten better. Even if he's been on the field for years, he's still in the age group where heroes are statistically most effective. I think at least. I don't know his real age since underground heroes tend to be under closer wraps than spotlight ones. No matter what, I need more information. We'll be on equal ground in terms of quirks, but he has a huge advantage when it comes to experience. I need to know his fighting style. Izuku turned to his laptop, quickly going to one of the more popular hero forums, Hero Talk. It was large, but it had a specific portion dedicated to underground hero sightings. For obvious reasons, they had fewer fans by a large margin, but those who did follow their exploits tended to be incredibly dedicated. After only an hour of searching, he hit the jackpot. It was a semi-close shot of Eraserhead fighting. Not only that, but the video went on for a full minute, not the average 10 to 20 seconds he usually found. He set the video on loop, muttering up a storm as he assessed the fighting style. There were hints of various fighting styles. Izuku didn't know any specific names, but he recognized multiple moves as one's other heroes had used, meaning they learned in a similar fashion, but the way they were incorporated was different to anything he had seen before. The hero used his capture weapon to execute moves that would have been impossible without it. Things such as holding a target in place to get a hit in, throwing them into the air, or, though it was much rarer, smashing them into the ground. Izuku felt shivers march quickly up his spine when he saw the last move. He asked himself, not for the first time and certainly not for the last, what he got himself into. Aizawa awoke to someone poking his forehead. He groaned, swatting the hand away and cracking his eyes open. Hisashi was grinning down at him, dressed in civilian clothes. What was that for? The black-haired man complained, Voice still gravelly from sleep. You didn't wake up for breakfast, and it's almost lunchtime. I figured I'd give you time to sleep in, but this is just excessive. He paused. Are you still in uniform? Shoyuta hummed an affirmative, burying deeper into the covers. He didn't notice the frown forming on his husband's face. What's up? I didn't hear you come in last night. Did you get in late? Hisashi asked. The underground hero merely hummed again. He didn't feel like talking much. His mind was still on the night before. Everything he did seemed to only make things worse. There was a spark of mistrust in Watcher's eyes that had grown each second. Aizawa could understand that spark. He was a hero, Watcher was a vigilante. There was only one correct course of action to take. What he couldn't understand was the terrified gleam. Nervousness? Worry? Unease? Sure, that was understandable. He was a kid who was being caught breaking the law, by a hero no less. But complete and absolute terror? That wasn't just some random reaction. He wondered if Watcher had thought he was a villain. It was unlikely. There was a gleam of recognition, which was something worth looking into. Few people knew who he was due to his status as an underground hero, but not ruled out entirely. There were a few instances where victims he helped had believed he was there to hurt them. Oh? Joe? Seriously, what's wrong? You never zone out like that. Aizawa sat up abruptly and swung his legs over the side of the bed, still wearing his boots, which he knows he's going to get chewed out for later, making Hisashi jump slightly. I met Watcher. The voice hero's eyes widened. Oh, I'm guessing you fought him, then. Did he get away or dash? I screwed up, Shoyuta told him, a lot. It's going to be a tougher case than I already thought. Hisashi sat next to him, resting a hand on his husband's leg comfortingly. I'm sure you didn't mess up as much as you think you did. Zashi, he had a panic attack. Everything I did just made it worse, and when I loosened my scarf since it seemed to be part of why he was panicking, he ran away, still mid-panic attack. Don't tell me that wasn't an absolute disaster, because I know it was. Okay, so maybe that was a disaster, Hisashi amended, but I'm sure you'll think of something. At least you've seen him now. Aizawa snorted sardonically. What's that English phrase? 1 step forward, 2 steps back? That applies to this perfectly. Before the blonde could respond, there was a knock on the door. They both looked up when Hitoshi popped his head in. I'm going to the park to work out, the teen said awkwardly. Figured I should let you know. Going to go now. That's my cue to get ready to go as well, Hisashi said, checking the time on his phone. I have an early afternoon shift. He shot Aizawa a worried look. Will you be okay? I'll be fine. I need to go down to the station and update Tsukachi on the case anyway. You go. He was dreading it, but it needed to be done. The detective had to be made aware of changes in the case, especially ones as concerning as that. When Aizawa rang Tsukachi, the detective had called him in to explain face-to-face. Sending a quick text to his husband and son, the hero hurried over to the station, impatient to catch Tsukachi up to speed. That was how he ended up sitting in the same office as a week ago. That was only a week ago? He thought. The detective needed to dig up the police department's copies of the Watcher files to update them, and so Aizawa waited. You said you saw him last night? Tsukachi asked, closing the door behind him and getting right down to business. Aizawa nodded. Yes. Due to certain events that went down, I think this is going to be harder than we thought. The detective raised an eyebrow. I don't like the sound of that. I'll start with the basic facts and then explain. It would take too long to do it any other way, Aizawa started. The physical description seemed more or less correct. He seemed slightly taller than the estimate, though that could be chalked up to the fact he's a growing teen. His general description. I have reason to believe his confident and chatty persona is a mask for his nervousness, but I'll get to that later. Most of the theories about his quirk are unlikely. He didn't react to it being turned off while I chased him, so he wasn't using it at that time. He also didn't teleport or heal himself while he was out of sight, or erasure wasn't active, unless he has a slow-acting quirk. On top of that, he didn't act like he had any foresight before I shut it off. Right now, the most likely ones that were theorized on file were pain tolerance or intelligence. It would be hard to tell if the latter was true with what I was given, especially if it's like, say, Nizu's and classifies as a mutant quirk. The pain tolerance theory is also possible, although it doesn't seem to be complete invulnerability if true. A new plausibility would be a sight enhancer, though the evidence is weak and circumstantial. It's possible his eyes are just used to the dark and his supposed analysis skills did the rest of the work. Tsukachi nodded, taking note of the observations. He paused at something, looking up at Aizawa with narrowed eyes. A mask? Not complete pain invulnerability? Eraserhead, what happened last night? The underground hero let out a sigh, massaging the bridge of his nose to hold back yet another headache. Slowly, he began to recount his experience with Watcher. As he went on, Tsukachi's eyebrows raised more and more, disappearing behind his hairline. His pen, which had been scratching out notes, stopped altogether by the time Aizawa reached the end and Watcher ran off. The two men sat in silence for a few minutes, trying to figure out what the events laid out before them meant. It was painting a picture, but of what, they didn't know. Weren't sure they wanted to know. Finally, Aizawa spoke up. I should put off trying to bring him in. It wouldn't do anything except make Watcher less trusting and less likely to work with us when something, whether that be us catching him getting wrapped up in something big, or some other unforeseeable circumstances, happens. Plus, there's something more at play here than just a kid playing hero. It might do more harm than good to bring him in without full understanding of his reasoning. He's obviously nervous around underground heroes, if not heroes in general, as it is. Not that I can blame him. What do you propose instead? We can't just ignore him. He's putting himself and others in danger. What I'm saying is that we, or just me, since I have looser regulations as a hero, should try to gain his trust. Letting him go when I see him, helping him fight if I run into him. Get him to tell us, on his own accord, why he's doing this. Like I said, this is beginning to look like there's a bigger picture. Forcing it out of him without that knowledge would be illogical. Tsukachi leaned back in his seat, fiddling with the pen in hand. That could take a while, although I suppose it could take longer to catch him by force. It wouldn't hurt to try, though. You've had more face-to-face interactions with vigilantes in the past, and I trust your judgment. Aizawa nodded, standing up to leave. I'll keep updating you as something happens. I understand you'll do the same? Yes, though I doubt we'll find out much. You've managed to shorten our list of quirks with just one interaction. That list took a month to make. With that, the man made his way to the door. Just as he opened it, the detective spoke up one more time. Eraserhead. The hero paused, looking over his shoulder. I hope you know what you're getting into. Aizawa nodded, turning his head and continuing his path out. He hoped so too. Izuku woke up feeling more rested than he had in a while. He supposed it was due to the fact he took a night off of patrol, letting his shoulder rest and watching a movie with his mom. It was Monday, and Monday meant another week of school. It was never something he looked forward to. Sure, he liked learning, but the cons vastly outweighed the singular pro. The other students were horrible, and the teachers weren't much better. They never hurt him physically like the kids, but they always looked the other way and ignored him. Still, he wasn't about to skip, so he made his way to the building like he had done so for years. He was feeling good, all things considered. Sure, his shoulder really hurt. Sure, he had a panic attack in front of Eraserhead, one of the best underground heroes of all time, in Izuku's opinion at least. Sure, he was about to walk into the lion's den he hated so much, but there were upsides. Entrance exams were getting closer each day. He was still helping people at night. His mom had seemed happier now that he was happier, and, ignoring the part where he had a panic attack, he got to meet a hero. While he was always watching villain attacks, he rarely got a chance to meet heroes face to face. The only other time in recent memory was with Al. With him, don't think about it, don't think about it. So, yeah, it was going pretty good. Until he walked into the classroom. He was immediately set on edge by the pairs of eyes on him. It was early, so only 5 of his peers were there, but their collective gaze burned a hole through Izuku, making him want to shrivel up. Why are they staring? Did I forget to take my contact out? No, Deku, you didn't even patrol last night. So what is it? He got his answer when he reached his desk. A porcelain vase stood there. 9 white flowers were inside, their pure color contrasting so much with the message behind them. Izuku felt his heart drop as he saw them. It wasn't the first time this had happened. It was rare, yes, but not unheard of. He could remember 2 other times and doubted he'd forgotten any more. Someone had placed them there to tell him so blatantly what they always whispered behind his back. "We don't want you." A snort roused him from his spiraling thoughts, and he looked up towards the sound. A group of 2 girls and a boy were giggling quietly, staring directly at him. They didn't try to hide who put them there. They knew no ramifications would come their way. Not from attacking the quirkless kid. Trying hopelessly to blink away the tears beginning to form, Izuku put his bag on his seat and picked up the vase. He carried it with shaking hands to the trash can at the front of the class. Freezing for a moment, he stared at the delicate petals of the ill-meaning gift before dropping it from his unstable grip. "What's wrong, you quirkless freak?" Someone, a girl, said behind him. "Don't you like your present?" Izuku didn't turn, didn't do anything except continue staring down at the trash, wishing for his hands to stop trembling and his eyes to stop burning. The teacher, who the greenette had just realized was in the room, did nothing except flip to another homework assignment and continue to grade. Izuku looked away. He was stupid to think the adult would do anything. He had made it clear at the beginning of the year that he had no love for useless kids who took up a spot in his class. He wasn't sure how long he stood there for. His mind was, for once, entirely blank. No responses bared their face, no whispers of tormentors' past words ringing in his skull. No dark voice that knew his greatest fears or flame of optimism. He was wrenched from this mind once again, this time by the school bell ringing. Turning, he realized all his peers had arrived at some point. He wasn't sure when. Scurrying back to his seat in order to not get berated by the teacher, Izuku forced himself to form thoughts once more. "This is fine. It's okay. It shouldn't bother me. I already knew they didn't want me around, so why am I so affected by it? It's not anything different." Whispers could be ignored, they couldn't. Bruises fade, they had been there, they had hurt. Maybe scars stayed, but they could be hidden. He could still feel the heat, the pain, sometimes, at night, when he's laying in bed with nothing but his thoughts. What did some flowers that were going to die matter? They mattered a lot? Izuku was fine. Sure, no one might actually like him, and maybe he stares up at the ceiling at night wondering if anything would really change that much if he had never been born. Maybe there were times he looked at his journals and felt hollow because it was, all along, some childish fantasy. But that was okay. He was okay. Really. Shinso sighed, leaning forward in his chair to rest his forehead on the table in front of him. His English homework was sprawled haphazardly across the piece of furniture. He had stopped by a small bakery before going home, having decided to get a snack after school. It had been a long day. Any school day felt long when his peers were wary of his quirk. The bullying had gotten better since moving schools after being fostered and quickly adopted, but the stares and whispers never seemed to stop. He was used to those. They weren't good, but they were better. But this day was unusually long. Each student had needed to meet with the school's quirk counselor for their yearly check-in. He never fully understood the point of them. Why not just go when you're having trouble, or your quirk got stronger? It was, as his dad would say, illogical. He was just glad that they stopped being mandatory in high school. Most quirks were controllable by that time, so there was no real reason to be required to go. The purple-haired teen made a loud, groaning noise. The cashier, the only other person in the shop, gave him a strange look, not that he saw it. A ringing and a crash made him jerk his head up. Leaning against the door was a green-haired kid around his age, wide-eyed and panting like he had just run a marathon. His back was up against the door while his arms wrapped protectively around a yellow backpack. Catching the teen's eyes, Shinso raised an eyebrow. The teen blushed in embarrassment and mumbled out an apology, straightening and unceremoniously dropping into the closest chair, which just so happened to be just across from Shinso. The insomniac pointedly ignored the action, deciding to instead work on the homework due the next day. Or so he would have done if the boy on the other side of the table hadn't mumbled out a question, almost too quiet to hear. Are those bags because of his quirk? For a second time, Shinso looked up and raised an eyebrow, and for a second time, the boy blushed. I said that out loud, didn't I? I'm so sorry, I'm trying to stop that. Sorry, he jumbled out. Sorry. The purple-haired teen blinked at the rambled apologies. It's fine. Then, after hesitating for a second, and no, they're not. Although I could ask you the same question. You look like you're trying to compete with mine. Green hair laughed nervously as if not sure whether or not it was a joke, which was completely possible. Shinso had been told he was hard to read. He looked suddenly, realizing something, and started to stand up. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to just sit at your table. I, was kinda thinking of something else. I'll move. Sorry. This guy apologizes a lot, doesn't he? Aloud, Shinso said, It's fine. You're not taking up a lot of space. It's not as if I'm actually paying attention to all this stuff. The greenette nodded slightly and sat back down, still looking embarrassed. My name is Izuku Midoriya, by the way. Hitoshi Shinso. So is there a reason you ran in here, or do you just like muffins that much? The greenette, Midoriya, looked down. He mumbled, There were some kids from my school. I didn't feel like talking to them. Same. At Midoriya's questioning look, he sighed. I don't get along with my classmates either. Understanding flickered across the other's face. Right. Silence drew on between them. Shinso looked down at his homework. He should finish it. He wanted to get into UA, and even the general education course required high grades. Midoriya seemed to be planning on the same, opening his notebook and beginning to scratch away with a pencil. Shinso picked up his pencil and tried to focus. It was another week before Aizawa met Watcher again. He had been sticking to the area around their first interaction, as well as various other sightings. Nobody had managed to find a particular patrol route for the vigilante. One night, he would be seen near the beaches, which had miraculously started to become cleaner, and the next, he'd be close to the wealthier neighborhoods. Aizawa had been scanning the street below him when he spotted a figure on a building a street over. It was hard to make out any discernible details, but he was confident it was a person. He made his way over, using his capture scarf to maneuver across the road. As he got closer, he realized it was Watcher. The boy didn't seem to notice he was no longer alone. Low muttering came from him. He was holding something in both hands, but with his back turned, the underground hero couldn't tell what it was. He decided to keep some distance between the two of them. Better not freak him out this time. Taking a breath, Aizawa called, Watcher. The vigilante jumped and whirled around, crimson eyes widening slightly at the sight of the hero. In one hand he held a pencil and a notebook, which he tried, and failed, to slip it into his pocket subtly. Eraserhead. The name was said with surprise and caution, but no immediate fear. He took a step back, dangerously close to the edge. The underground hero eyed the short distance warily. Easy kid, I'm not here to bring you in. Watcher eyed him disbelievingly but stayed where he was. He shifted his weight slightly, another sign of his unease. Aizawa belatedly realized that he probably couldn't move, since the rooftop behind him was too far to get to without a running start. They stared at each other for only a few seconds before Watcher broke eye contact in favor of focusing on Aizawa's moving hand. Aizawa took 2 small, plastic bags from his pocket, letting the vigilante see what it was before tossing one over. Watcher caught it easily, fixing the man with a suspicious gaze. Jelly packet, Aizawa explained at the unspoken question. Slowly, making sure the team could tell what he was doing, he moved closer to the edge, sitting with one leg hanging off the side and the other bent to rest his forearm on. He opened his own packet. I'm guessing you won't have it here, but it's important to have something to eat if you're going to be exercising for hours. These are just easy to carry around. Watcher hadn't made a noise outside of calling the hero's name. It was hard to match the kid in front of him, because that's what he was, a kid with the confident, talkative one from the police files, especially given their last encounter. Slowly, as if testing the waters, Watcher took a few steps to the side, still watching the hero. Aizawa was worried he'd try to run again, but instead he warily made his way and squatted near the doorway inside. It was a position where he was ready to leap into action, but it meant he was willing to stay for the time being. They sat there in a long silence, the younger assessing the older, who made sure to keep the other in his sight while not staring him down. Finally, Aizawa spoke up again. I wanted to apologize for the last time. It wasn't my intention to seriously harm or scare you. I'm assigned to bring you in, and I'd prefer to do so without injury, he said. Be honest, kids like him prefer that, even if it's an unfortunate truth. Sure enough, the teen tensed at the words, bring you in, bracing his empty hand on the ground by his legs to help himself spring up if needed. His scarlet eyes burned holes through the hero. Of course, that's only if I see Watcher, and I haven't caught a glimpse of him since that first encounter, Aizawa continued. He risked a meaningful glance at the vigilante. Watcher's eyes widened dramatically, confusion and understanding warring with each other. Understanding as to what the hero was implying, confusion as to why. The teen looked away quickly, seemingly preparing himself for something. I'm sorry too. That wasn't what the hero was expecting. Aizawa looked at him, eyes asking a question, one that Watcher answered. I'm sorry for freaking out like that. It hadn't happened in a while. That raised a lot more questions than it solved. Was he used to panic attacks? Why did he feel a need to apologize? You don't need to apologize for something you can't help. It's illogical. That was harsher than he meant for it to come out, but the point still stood. Watcher paused at that, seeming to think it through as if it never occurred to him. That was slightly concerning yet again. An alarm blared a few streets away, making both people on the roof shoot to their feet. They looked to each other and started running, the vigilante following Aizawa. They quickly found out what the alarm was for. Fire poured out of every window on the top story of a 6-story building. There was a man in one of the windows looking over an alley, trying to stay away from the heat but being unable to maneuver out. He was just out of reach of the fire escape. A small group of civilians was watching from the street, and from their vantage point, Aizawa could see a few of them talking urgently to their phones. No need to call emergency services, then, if they were already called. He readied himself to go in but paused for a second. Watcher, you need to stay here, he urgently said. You're not trained to handle this. Not having time to check that the vigilante was actually listening, Aizawa leaped into action. He got to the roof of the building, using one strand of his capture scarf to grab hold of an outcropping. Skillfully, he climbed down slightly, one hand on the scarf on the other helping his feet to keep him up. Sir, I'm a hero. I'll need you to stay still so I can get you out. Without having time to wait for a response, he wrapped the unused end of his weapon around the man's waist. Carefully, he lifted the man out and onto a platform of the fire escape. Aizawa couldn't climb with him, and the scarf was too short just to place him on the ground. Is there anyone else inside? He asked. The man, who seemed to be shaken but not harmed, nodded. My husband and our daughter. She should be in her room, but I'm not sure where Itsuo is. Get to the ground. Emergency services should be here soon to check on you. With that, he crawled into the building. Immediately, he covered his mouth and nose with the collar of his uniform in hand, trying to filter the smoke slightly. The goggles helped with his eyes somewhat, but it still felt like he was using his quirk. Before he was able to move into the danger, a thump behind him drew his attention. Watcher had come in behind him, hand over his face mask like Aizawa. In it, we don't have time for this, the hero thought, giving the vigilante a "we'll talk about this later" look before turning back to the flames. Debris lay everywhere. What was once a table was in shambles, fueling the inferno. Similarly, other pieces of furniture lay about in the open space, barely recognizable. The smoke alarm was still blaring in Aizawa's ears. Spotting a doorway, Aizawa carefully stepped around the chaos, hunching slightly to stay closer to the ground. Behind him, Watcher did the same. The opening led to a hallway, and he systematically checked the rooms off to the side of it. They were all empty, except for the last one on the right. A young girl with spikes running down her arms and legs was huddled in the farthest corner, coughing loudly. She looked to be around 5. There wasn't much fire inside the room, but he realized with dread that part of the ceiling had caved, trapping one of her legs underneath. Aizawa moved toward her, squatting down when he got there. Taking his hand away from his mouth, he tried to pull it up and away from her. It was too heavy. He looked up to Watcher, who was crouching by the doorway, and jerked his head. Understanding the meaning, the vigilante came over and put both hands by Aizawa's. Their strength combined was enough to lift it enough to get the leg out. After a quick comment from Aizawa, the girl tugged at it with both hands, bringing it up to her chest. As soon as it was out, they let the debris back down. "Hey, are you able to move?" Aizawa asked the girl. He spoke in a murmur, trying to keep the smoke from his lungs as much as possible. "I'm here to get you out. I'm a hero." The girl took a breath to answer but doubled over into a violent coughing fit. She shook her head vigorously, trying to get her breathing under control. "Okay, I'll need to pick you up, all right? We'll get you back to your dad." With that, he moved closer. The girl wrapped her arms around his neck, and he secured her into a bridal carry. It wasn't the easiest to walk around with, but he didn't have much time to do anything else. The trio quickly shuffled back to the window. They were almost there when the girl said, "Dubby, Dad was in the kitchen. Did you get him?" More coughs accompanied the words. Aizawa grit his teeth. He needed to get her out now. "I'll take her, you get her other dad." He looked to Watcher, who had spoken. The boy's arms were out. In a split-second decision, Aizawa handed the girl carefully over and went back in. He needed to trust the vigilante knew what he was doing. Aizawa found the man quickly. Together, with the man hunkered over beside the hero, they too made their exit. The ambulances and fire trucks had arrived. After confirming there were no more civilians inside, he sought out Watcher. He found him with the girl and the first man outside an open ambulance. The girl was crying, rubbing at the tear tracks on her cheeks. The vigilante was squatting in front of her. "Hey," the boy said soothingly. "Can you look at me?" After receiving a shake of her head, he smiled lightly and continued. "That's okay. I'm not the biggest fan at eye contact, either. You know, you were really brave." But I was scared," she babbled, voice hoarse from crying and smoke. "And I just did what you and the hero said to do." Sometimes, trusting someone enough to do what they ask takes a lot more bravery than trying to do it alone, the boy replied lightly. Hesitantly, he reached up to ruffle her hair. "Besides, you can be really scared and brave at the same time. Bravery is being able to work past your fear to do something anyway because you know it's right. And just now, you did what was right. I was able to save you because you listened to what Eraserhead said, and he was able to help your dad because you told us where he was. You were a hero tonight." As he spoke, the girl's sobs died down. He pulled his hand away, only to brace it on the ground to keep himself upright as the girl barreled into him. She threw her arms around him. "Thank you," she whispered. Watcher's eyes widened in surprise. Slowly, he shifted his weight away from his hand and returned the hug. "Of course." His eyes were watery and his voice cracker, but that could have just been from the smoke. Aizawa looked away to scan the crowd. None of the responders had noticed the vigilante, but it was only a matter of time. Watcher seemed to realize that, standing after being released. He bobbed his head to the girl's dads, both of which had joined them. He made eye contact with the hero and, with a terse nod, fled the scene. Izuku sat on his bed and stared down at his phone, disbelief evident in his eyes. He had notifications on for various hero news sites, and a smaller, local one just released an article. Vigilante, Watcher. By Aiki Yamane. Late last night, an apartment building in Kiyoshi Ward was set aflame, trapping a family of 3 inside. Itsuo and Hideki Toshiro were home with their daughter Hina when they smelled smoke. Izuku skipped a few lines, scanning over the necessary information about the incident. An underground hero on patrol was the first to arrive on scene, due to Section 5, Subsection 3 of Underground Hero Laws and Regulations. Their identity cannot be released in media. They successfully rescued the small family, saving their lives and allowing for the firefighters who arrived at that time to prevent the spread of the flames. No official statements have been released as of yet, but multiple witnesses place a vigilante, nicknamed Watcher, at the scene. Watcher may not be a known name to most readers. For many in the southeastern wards of Mizudafu, however, he's become a frequent night sighting. While no information on the case has been released to the public, various claims have been made suggesting he has been active for about a month. Not much is known about the vigilante. Mainly active at night, Watcher is a mystery wrapped in uncertainty. Civilians who have had interactions with him claim to not see him use a quirk, raising the question as to just how premeditated his actions are. Those same individuals also claim that he seems young, the estimation being high school age. An anonymous source, who claims to work closely with the police team in charge of stopping him, states that a hero with a past of vigilante cases has been put on the investigation. They did not mention the name of said hero. Heroics Now was also given what our source claims is a surveillance feed screenshot depicting Watcher, below. Izuku stopped reading, head reeling. That was him. Heroics Now, a primary Muzutafu news site, was talking about him. The thought was a strange one. What would this mean? All he wanted to do was help people. He didn't care about publicity. In fact, he preferred to stay unknown. Would that get harder? It didn't matter now, he supposed. This was going to happen whether he liked it or not. Izuku's eyes still burned dully. Smoke had gotten underneath his contact lenses while in the building, and he continually had to remind himself not to rub at them. His breathing still didn't feel quite right even a few days afterward. He opened his notebook, cursing silently. There were only 2 blank pages left. He hadn't realized how many entries he had made. It usually took much longer to fill an entire book. Making a silent note to grab a new one when he got home, he started recording the latest criminal's quirk, a ferrokinetic emitter. How exciting! The vigilante hadn't heard Eraserhead coming the night of the fire. He had been caught completely unaware. It was a problem that he needed to fix. This time, at least, he was the first to see the other. Watcher, Eraserhead greeted, dropping down into the alley where Izuku stood. It was the same greeting as before, but there was less caution in his voice. He didn't expect the vigilante to run this time. Hey, Eraserhead. Beautiful night, isn't it? The boy joked, adopted his confident person, shutting his notebook before he had a chance to write. It had been a mistake to let the hero see the other side. One that he didn't plan on making again. Eraserhead hummed in affirmation, looking over the scene and raising an eyebrow slightly at the tied-up crook on the ground. The action seemed familiar, but Izuku couldn't place where he had seen it before. I wanted to talk with you about the fire. Izuku stayed silent. The look he had shared with the hero when he followed Eraserhead into the building had told him this would happen, but he had hoped his exit that night would dissuade the man. Apparently not. He subtly started searching for possible escape routes if needed. You did a good job, the man continued, shocking the vigilante. Don't get me wrong. You shouldn't have gone in without proper training. You could have made the situation much worse. But I also know that that girl wouldn't have been able to get out without you. She's on crutches for now, but's expected to make a full recovery. That was good. Izuku had been worried about her. Still, he side-eyed the hero suspiciously at the rest of it. What was he playing at? Thanks, but I don't need or want your validation, he shot back. It was a half-truth. Need it? No way. Want it? Maybe a little. I was just doing what was right. Eraserhead ignored the harsh words. That's partly why you did well. You have potential, kid, and you don't expect anything in return. Which is why I can't help but wonder why you started doing this. Wasn't that blunt? Sorry, Eraser, the boy started, shortening the name. You know I won't tell you anything. Try again in a few years. Or even better, don't. Problem child, the hero sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Izuku caught him muttering under his breath, I don't understand teens. Izuku blinked, stiffening slightly. Problem child wasn't a name he had been called before, but there was a first for everything. Did he do something wrong? Eraserhead looked annoyed, but that seemed to be his resting face, based on their few interactions. Maybe he didn't want Izuku using the shortened version of his hero name. There was also the facts the hero knew he was a teen. He wasn't trying too hard to hide the truth, but it was still worrying. Adults were never polite to him after finding out about his quirklessness, and he had assumed the reasons Eraserhead was civil were that he knew neither age nor quirk. He cleared his throat quietly, pushing the troubled thoughts away. Talk now, overthink later. Well, since you're here, care to call the police? I can't exactly call them, he said, patting his pockets for emphasis. No need, they already know. A civilian called it in from their apartment. Eraserhead nodded his head to the notebook. What were you writing? And nothing. Izuku quickly responded, voice squeaking slightly. He held the notebook closer to his chest. It was a creepy hobby, he knew. All his peers said so. Why do you want to know? The hero held his hands up consolingly. I was just curious. It's a big mystery that some people want to know. Izuku hadn't known that. How many people had seen him muttering to himself on rooftops or in alleys? It was just a hobby. He never used the information afterward, seeing as he never saw anyone a second time. The only outlier to that was his entry on Eraserhead, and there was no way he would let the hero see that. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, with Izuku staring the hero down suspiciously. He couldn't get a read on the guy. First, Eraserhead's actively trying to catch him, then he's giving him a jelly packet, which was actually pretty good when Izuku worked up the nerve to try it, and now he's dropping in for the sake of dropping in? And that's not mentioning how Izuku can't seem to guess what he's thinking. It was giving the teen a headache trying to understand. Well, I should, go, the teen said awkwardly. He was never good at keeping conversations going. Besides, he had promised himself he would go head back home after finishing the last fight. It's a school night, isn't it? Eraserhead said, sounding more like he was reminding himself rather than asking a question. You shouldn't be out so late. Izuku couldn't help but snort at that. You're looking the other way for vigilantism, but you draw the line at staying up? The hero just sighed, something he seemed to do a lot. Just leave if you need to, problem child. Izuku cursed under his breath as he ran on the rooftops. It was freezing. He had been watcher for almost 8 months if he was counting correctly. During that time, the seasons had changed twice. It was the middle of February, and the cold winter air hadn't yet let up for spring. He had started layering his uniform more during the winter, but it was hard without restricting his movement. How do heroes do it? He thought idly. Along with the extra layers, the outfit had been minorly updated. He had retired his red shoes from school use and kept them solely for vigilante purposes. Because of that, he added metal plating to the toes to pack more of a punch. He also created shin guards like soccer players wear. With a bit more than a week to go until the entrance exams and juggling 2 lives, his mind was trying to keep up with everything and his thoughts had become more sporadic. Teachers were pushing their students harder than ever, hoping to get some into high-profile high schools. Bakugo and his group had been more aggravated than normal, but Izuku had managed to get away with minimal damage. The streets were busy. Izuku had been getting home an hour or more later than he used to. There were a few nights where he had gotten home just as his alarm rang. Apparently, a lot of people had things to do at 3 in the morning. He needed to buy notebooks in bulk to keep up with how fast he wrote through them. Since their encounter after the fire, he and Eraserhead had run into each other multiple times. Izuku entered each meeting with nerves. It was too suspicious to him. He had seemed so set in catching Watcher at first. Why change views so quickly? Regardless of his caution, Izuku found the attention nice in a way. It was strange to have an adult that wasn't his mom looking out for him. He had come to look forward to seeing the hero, even if it was a just nod in recognition here, or dealing with a problem together there. It was a lot. He silently thanked himself for not taking up any extracurriculars. It had crossed his mind to convince his mom to let him join a self-defense class, but it would have been more stress than he could handle. Izuku paused as he jumped over an alley. Turning back, he looked over the ledge to see what caught his attention. 5 people, 3 women and 2 men, were standing in a loose circle. They all had tense postures and were speaking in serious voices. What do you think? You think the offer is real? One woman with ram horns asked her companions. She was barefoot, and Izuku could just make out hooves instead of feet. It has to be, right? Jiren's always careful with offering gigs. He knows how to check authenticity, one of the men replied. Yeah, but it seems so bizarre. I mean, do these guys truly expect to defeat All Might of all people? They don't even have a set date or time, just be on standby. Sounds pretty fishy to me. That sparked Izuku's interest. Someone was planning on taking down All Might? He crouched down and took out his notebook, ready to take notes. I mean, Jiren said they're asking for as many people as possible, a different woman pointed out. They're obviously planning something big. A friend of mine said that his gang also got approached. Still, I haven't heard of the League of Villains before. Pretty shitty name if you ask me, the first woman said. Besides, this is pretty different from our normal security jobs. I think we should do it, the man who hadn't spoken yet said. Whatever they have planned is big, and can you imagine the street cred we would get if it works out? We could set our own prices. Hell, we could actually get some territory and start getting serious. 3 of his companions nodded in agreement. The first woman ran a hand through her short hair, deep in thought. Oh, what the hell? I'm still suspicious, but if you guys want to, I'll go. We stick together. They seemed to have come to an understanding. As their conversation turned to another topic, Izuku started sketching each of them out and making notes of what he could. Only 2 of them had mutant quirks, the woman with horns and a man with an extra set of arms, so he wasn't able to get much in that regard. Should he take them down now? On one hand, they were villains based on their conversation. On the other, he wasn't sure he could take them, especially if they worked in security like they claimed. It also might tip off whoever Jiren was, which would make the plan harder to stop. Whatever the plan was, it sounds like it's in the early stages, Izuku thought. The League of Villains are asking for third-party villains, and they're pretty new if what those guys were saying is anything to go by. That means they're a small group looking to make a name for themselves. Should I ask Eraserhead for help? He asked himself. No way. I still don't know how much I can trust him. He won't even want to hear about this without solid proof. Heroes don't exactly trust the word of vigilantes. It was a big claim, saying there was a plan to take down the number 1 hero. If he wanted to be believed, he needed more than an overheard conversation. At school, there was a growing sense of anxiety within the student body. Entrance exam season was about to start, and in another month, their last year of junior high would be over. Izuku kept his head down most of the time, making sure not to get on anyone's nerves. He knew from experience that the higher the energy, whether it be from nerves or excitement or anger, the more likely it was for him to come home with more injuries to nurse. He had a month-long streak of not having any burn marks, and he didn't want to stop that record. Which is why he got nervous when Bakugo cornered him behind the building after school. The blonde must have followed him after class let out because as soon as he turned the corner, Izuku was slammed against the wall. He didn't fall, but Bakugo still managed to loom over him, one hand crackling furiously with explosions. I hope you're not still planning on going to UA. They haven't dropped that rule, quirkless freaks like you aren't welcome, the bully snarled. I'm not trying out for the hero course, Izuku mumbled, hanging his head to hide the tears building up in his eyes. So you finally realized you couldn't be a hero? Bakugo remarked snidely. I'm amazed it took you so long. I knew you were an idiot, but I didn't know you were that much of one. I bet they didn't even accept your registration forms. The greenette stayed silent. His hands curled into fists, grasping onto the sides of his pants. The bully noticed that and let out a harsh bark of laughter. They did, didn't they? See, Deku, you really are worthless. Shut up, Izuku mumbled under his breath. Bakugo grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, slamming the shorter boy into the wall behind him and lifting him a few inches of the ground. The F, did you just say to me, Deku? Izuku gritted his teeth and shouted, I said shut up. You're always trying to prove you're better than me. I know you are, okay? His voice dropped. You're smarter, stronger, and more popular. I know. Please, just leave me alone. The blonde's eye twitched. You trying to SCK up to me or something? God, you're pathetic. He let go with one hand to punch Izuku in the face before letting him drop unceremoniously to the ground. You're not even worth my time right now. Izuku cradled his cheek lightly with one hand, curling slightly into himself and biting his cheek to stop from sobbing right there on the floor. He distantly heard Bakugo stalk off but tuned it out. Gingerly, he pressed a bit harder on his cheek before immediately stopping when the stinging got worse. It would bruise, that was for sure. Tsukachi tapped his fingers on the table, scanning the street outside for the man he was waiting for. The cafe wasn't too busy, it was coming to the end of most people's lunch break. Meanwhile, the detective had just gotten on his after staying later than he meant to in order to file reports. The tan trench coat he normally wore, along with his hat, had been draped across the back of his chair, his gloves stuffed into a pocket. He was just in dress pants and his button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Despite the chill outside, the cafe was quite warm. He leaned back, relaxing into the chair. He took a sip of his coffee before placing it alongside his now empty plate. Along with the watcher case, he had been put on a few more minor investigations that had been more stressful than anticipated. He understood that he had work to do but sometimes wondered if there was anyone else who could take them. His higher-ups didn't seem to realize how stressful a vigilante could be, even if they had never met. A ringing brought his attention back to the cafe, focusing on the man that had just walked through the front door. Tsukachi raised his hand slightly to catch his attention. The detective rose from his seat as the other came closer, offering a handshake. "It's good to see you again, Naomasa," the man greeted, giving Tsukachi a smile and accepting the hand. "I'm sorry I haven't been able to meet up until now." "It's no trouble, I'm sure you've been working yourself to the bone to get ready for you. Why don't you sit?" The detective waved a hand to the chair opposite him, sliding into his own. "How have you been, Toshinori?" "Good," Toshinori Yagi said. The blond man was still wearing the large clothes he wore in his muscled form, making it hard to make out his skeletal figure. At the pointed look from Tsukachi, he coughed and sheepishly amended, "Well, about as well as you can expect. How about you? I haven't seen you since the last time I was in the area." "I'm doing fine." "That's good to hear." They continued chatting. Tsukachi sipped his beverage as his old friend told him of what he had done since they had last seen each other face to face. It never ceased to amaze him how much work the #1 hero could saddle himself with even now when he had 3 short hours in his hero form. "Nizu has been having me come to the faculty meetings recently, along with sitting in on some of the heroics classes for the first years. It's been relatively normal, except there's no Class 1A and he refuses to tell me why. He just laughs whenever I bring it up and at this point, I'm too afraid to ask anymore." Tsukachi laughed slightly, knowing exactly why there was no class. Yagi looked at him suspiciously but didn't say anything about it. Instead he asked, "I'm afraid I've been talking your ear off. How about you, Naomasa? What have you been up to?" The detective set his cup down on the table, resting his hands around out. Same old, same old. Nothing nearly as interesting as you seem to have it. Although, I did get put on the newest vigilante case. It's not as bad as it could be, but it's been a hassle trying to track down all the witnesses." Yagi nodded in sympathy before saying, "I vaguely remember an article about a fire a few months ago that mentioned a new vigilante. I wrote it off as rumors. You know how the media is about this sort of thing, but I guess it had some base. Watcher was his name." "Yeah, that's him. I'm not allowed to say much since it's an ongoing investigation, but it's been annoying. We have an underground hero working on the case with us who believes it's something bigger, so we haven't made any big moves just yet." "That's worrying. Undergrounds tend to have a good sense for that sort of thing." Yagi scrunched his eyebrows up in concern. "Hopefully it's nothing too bad." Tsukachi gave him a grim smile. "In my experience, that's too much to hope for. Last time I thought that, I got wrapped up in the Trigger and Villain Factory cases, not to mention a whole gang of vigilantes. You pulled quite a few all-nighters back then," the hero recalled. Suddenly, he dissolved into a coughing fit, leaning and covering his mouth with his arm. Tsukachi stood up in alarm as he saw flecks of blood coming from his friend's mouth and grabbed the paper napkins he had grabbed when had sat down. He waited nervously for the older man to calm before handing them over. Yagi took them graciously, wiping his mouth and arm quickly. "Thank you." The detective was silent before, quietly so no one else could hear, asked, "It's getting worse, isn't it?" The blonde looked out the window, avoiding eye contact. "I pushed myself past my limit a few months ago to help a middle schooler. It's not too bad but," he trailed off. Remorse glittered in his eyes. Tsukachi put his hand on his friend's shoulder. "That's why you're going to UA, right? To find a successor." After a hesitant nod, he continued, "I won't tell you not to worry because I'm sure you're tired of hearing it. But I will say this, your legacy won't end when you have to retire. It won't end when you do. Everything you do and have done, everything you say and have said, will stick with people for the rest of their lives. Just because you're losing time doesn't mean you're not a hero." Yagi nodded, giving Tsukachi a watery smile. Thank you, my friend, truly. Izuku slipped off his hoodie dejectedly, throwing it onto his bed. The armed guards quickly followed suit. He had been working late the past few nights hoping to find the villains again, or at least someone who knew the name Jiren. Based on what he had overheard, they were a well-known figure in the criminal underworld and some sort of broker. It wasn't much to go off of. It also wasn't something he could just search on the internet. He had tried using a library computer, he was too paranoid to use his own, but nothing turned up. Jiren knew how to disappear. He debated again asking Eraserhead, but quickly pushed the idea out of his mind. Yeah, imagine how that conversation would go. He'd probably think I was trying to become a villain and go right back to trying to turn me in. He slipped into pajama pants and was about to pull his shirt on when he glanced at the mirror. His physique had toned in the months of vigilantism. He wasn't bulky and probably never would be, but he was no longer as scrawny as he had been. He was built for stealth and quick attacks, not head-on fights. A dark bruise, larger and older than the one on his cheek, took up a good portion of his stomach. A villain had managed to land a gut punch in a few nights ago and it was still sore to twist his torso too much. He had a few minor scars to add to his collection, but none that had been life-threatening injuries. Somehow, he had been lucky enough to not have any critical injuries. The greenette pointedly didn't look at his shoulders. He knew what he would see, discolored and slightly warped skin from years of small explosions aimed there. Most were old, back when he didn't know how to properly treat the wounds, but there were a few that, no matter how good he was at first aid, stayed. He shook himself from his thoughts and tugged his shirt on. He quickly took his used contacts out, threw them in the trash, and turned his light off. Silently creeping back to his bed, careful not to make too much noise, he let himself go to sleep. Shinso stared at the ceiling of his room. It was almost 1 in the morning and he hadn't gotten a wink of sleep, which was concerningly normal for him. Sliding off of his bed, he decided to make a cup of tea, not coffee. He actually wanted to sleep. It was dark in the short hallway connecting the bedrooms with the living room and kitchen, the only light coming from a lamp that his dad kept on for when his other dad came home. The black-haired insomniac often came home at late hours, so the blonde hero always made sure to keep a light on. After turning the electric kettle on to boil water, Shinso moved over to the couch and let his thoughts drift. When he first came to be fostered by his now-dads, it was a shock to the system. He got placed with the hero who got him out of an abusive household. Not just any hero either. Eraserhead. His personal idol ever since he discovered the world of underground heroes, and the man he had decided he wanted to be like if he managed to be accepted into a hero course. Then there was his pops, who he mainly called that to differentiate between the two parents. He had been averse to the man at first because of his loud personality, pun slightly intended, but eventually opened up and grew closer. He couldn't imagine a life without him. Like with any family, there had been various misunderstandings. One night, Shinso had snuck out, something he had gotten used to doing at his last foster home. The two heroes had both freaked out. After his dad found him wandering the streets, they had had a conversation about it. An actual conversation, not just the two of them yelling at him or worse. After only 2 months of living there, they had asked him if they could adopt him. He had already accepted his fate of ending up in a group home until he aged out of the system, so the question had thrown him through a loop. It took a few days, but he eventually calmed down enough to state his answer. He kept his family name, though. He had been in the foster system for as long as he could remember, and to him, it held no ties to anyone except himself. He hadn't officially been adopted yet. The paperwork took a long time to process and they were still running into a few problems here and there. But it was slowly happening and Shinso had begun calling them Dad and Pops respectively soon after. None of that was even mentioning that they supported his dream of being a hero, which hadn't happened before. They had found out by accident when the teen had accidentally left his school choices on the dining table. His pops had found it and, after seeing the UA Hero course and General Education courses written as his top 2 choices, they spoke to him about it. As UA teachers, they weren't allowed to play favorites or leak the entrance exams to him. However, they did warn him that, based on information from past examinees, there was a bias towards strong, physical quirks. They also said that his dad had used a little-known rule in his first year that allowed a different course student to switch to the hero course if they rank high enough in the sports festival. Shinso had made a plan then. While he would try out for both, he would also begin to train with both parents to ensure he could place high in the festival just in case. No matter what it took, however, he would get into the hero course. He was asleep before he made his late-night tea. The greenette tightened his grip on his yellow backpack. Staring up at the large staircase, it felt like some sort of dream. Forget going to UA, just the act of being on campus was enough to fill him with a jumble of emotions. Apprehension, joy, and, surprisingly, resentment. The last surprised Izuku. He had looked forward to trying out for UA for years, but now that he was there, he couldn't help but feel a spark of bitterness. This school was said to have the best hero and support courses in the country, and one of the best general education courses. So why stop a whole minority from taking part? And why did it never turn up in the media? He forced himself to move forward. Kids in various uniforms were milling about outside, as there were still a few minutes until they would be allowed in. Finding an unoccupied space on the steps, he sat down and slid his backpack off to make sure he had everything. Pencils, check. Eraser, check. Calculator, check. Admissions papers, check. The last item had been sent out to those trying out for any courses. They were checked at the door to make sure no one was trying to steal someone else's spot. Supposedly, it was a common occurrence. Attention list, examinees. A loud voice came from the loudspeakers set up across the campus. The excited tone sounded familiar, but Izuku couldn't place it. Those taking the general education exams will now be allowed in the building. If you're here for the business course or support course, your examinations will be held at the time on your papers. You're free to wait outside or in the lecture halls. Heart beating fast, Izuku stayed seating. He watched as the other student hopefuls crowded to get in, some of them shoving each other accidentally, or maybe it was on purpose, and decided to wait until it calmed down slightly. On the other side of the stairs, he made eye contact with a familiar purple-haired boy, Shinso, if he remembered correctly, who seemed to have the same idea. The other teen stared at him with an unreadable expression before nodding his head slightly. The movement reminded Izuku of Eraserhead. The small nods were common when he did something the hero approved of. In this case, he assumed it was supposed to be some sort of encouragement. He returned the gesture. When the crowd finally thinned, the two boys made their way to the lecture room chapter text. Long desks stretched across the entire lecture hall. Each one looked like it could sit at least 20 people. The examinees all slowly moved to assigned seats, grouped by their junior high schools. Izuku nervously glanced at the two people to either side of him. He was the only Aldra student trying out, so neither looked familiar. The noise within the room was almost deafening. Teens were shouting in excitement throughout the room. Some attempted to pace in the little space they were given. Izuku tapped his fingers on the desk in a vain attempt to ease his jitteriness. His heart was racing fast, knowing that this was his only chance at being admitted to his dream school. The lights dimmed. Examinees looked around in surprise before sitting down. A blond man walked to the podium in the front, hair sticking up like a cockatoo. He wore tinted sunglasses, despite being indoors, that hid his eyes. A black leather jacket opened at the top to reveal his notorious directional speaker around his neck. Oh my God, is that Present Mike? Is he a teacher here? He has to be. Why else would he be at the entrance exams? Izuku fanboyed. His quirk is so cool. How loud can he make his voice? Can he make it unnaturally quiet? Not likely, or else he would use it more. Can you be quiet? Some of us are trying to listen, one of the boys next to him whispered harshly. Izuku jumped and blushed in embarrassment. He really needed to work on his mumbling. Focusing in on what was being said, he realized he missed the beginning introductions. Onto the exam rules. Present Mike was saying, shouting. Listen up, examinees, this'll be the only time it's explained. The test will be divided into multiple sections, shown up there. He pointed up to the board behind him, where a timetable was shown. Depending on the topic, you'll have half an hour to 45 minutes to complete each of the 4 parts. At the end of the first 2, you'll have a quick break to stretch your legs or whatever. Any questions so far? There was a pause to allow anyone to speak up. When it became obvious no one would, the hero continued. Okay, the last thing to say is there are heroes here, including me, who are teachers at UA. He wildly gestured around the room, pointing out various costumed adults across the room. Izuku didn't have the best view, but he was certain two of them were Midnight and Ectoplasm. We'll be around the room and we'll be watching to make sure no cheating is happening. If any of us see you, you'll automatically be barred from UA and other hero schools that offer a general education course. There should be a folder on the rack beneath your seats. Take out the packet labeled General Math, and keep it face down until the timer starts. Again, the teachers will know if you try to cheat. You'll have 45 minutes for this portion. Izuku bent over and grabbed the folder, eagerly opening it. As soon as the timer started, he flipped the packet over and started reading the first problem. It was a basic algebra problem to start. He quickly solved for x and went on. The next was significantly harder, but he still answered it with relative ease. He started to calm down slightly, finding a rhythm in the work. It was nothing he hadn't learned in school before. As promised, the examinees were given time halfway through the exam to use the restroom, stretch, or whatever else they needed to do. Most stayed in the lecture hall. Izuku pushed his chair back, lacing his fingers together and stretching them above his head. The kids on either side of him had already cleared away, leaving him with some extra space. Overall, he felt pretty good so far. There were a few tough questions in the English portion, but nothing he couldn't handle. As for the math portion, it had always been one of his best subjects, whether it was algebra, geometry, or something else. He had breezed through it quickly and without too much difficulty. This seat taken? Izuku yelped and turned to the right. The purple-haired boy he kept running in there was pointing at the seat next to him. Someone was sitting there. Well, obviously, all the seats were taken, but they left for now and dash. He cut himself off from rambling too much and finished lamely, and not right now, but they'll come back. Shinso shrugged and pulled the seat out to sit down. Noticing Izuku's confused look, he gestured to a large group of kids near the front of the room. They were crowding where I was. Besides, you're currently the most tolerable person in this room. Midoriya, right? Thanks? I think? And yeah, that's me. And you're Shinso? The other teen hummed in confirmation, leaning his head back and closing his eyes. There was a silence between them before Izuku, who felt like he should keep the conversation going, asked, "So why are you trying out for general education?" Shinso blinked his eyes open and turned his head awkwardly to look at the greenette. He stared with an unreadable emotion. Why did he remind Izuku so much of Eraserhead? Before saying, "I'm planning on going into the hero course. This is just a backup." Ignoring the slight sting of jealousy, Izuku's face lit up. "Really? That's so cool. What's your quirk, if you don't mind me asking? I'm sure you'll get in regardless of what it is." Of course, brainwashing. The greenette blinked at the interruption. Shinso was looking at him with a hard expression now, as if purposely trying to make it unreadable. He was gauging his reaction, Izuku realized. "That's so interesting. Is it touch-based, voice-based, or something else? I can imagine a lot of situations where it would be useful, especially if you go into underground work and keep it hidden. There are few cases he stopped himself from saying that I helped stopped, that I've heard of that could use something like that." Shinso blinked in surprise, apparently not expecting that reaction. In a slightly dumbfounded voice, he replied, "It, needs a response. If I ask a question with the intent to use my quirk and they answer, I get more or less full control until I turn it off." Izuku's hands itched to grab a notebook, but he hadn't brought one with him. Instead, he mimed writing notes down, which he found helped him remember his thoughts. "Interesting. There are a few skills I can think of that could help you in a hero setting. Learning how to copy others' voices would help in situations where you don't want to reveal yourself, or if your opponent already knows about your quirk. That, combined with throwing your voice, would be pretty useful. Does it have to be phrased as a question, or do you just need a questioning tone of voice? How long does it last? How many people can you use it on at a time, and how detailed can you make your instructions? What's the distance restrictions? If you know how their quirk works, can you make them use it? What Izuku cut himself off, finally realizing he was rambling. Sorry, those are probably too prying. Sorry. The purple-haired teen could only shrug. How about you? What's your quirk? Oh well dash. All right examinees. Present Mike was in the front again. Please make your way back to your seats so we can finish this up. Shinso stood up and turned around heading back to his seat. Before he got too far, he paused and glanced over his shoulder. Good luck, Midoriya. Izuku barely had time to stutter out, you too, Shinso, before the other was too far away. Shinso opened the door to his apartment, dropping his backpack near the shoe rack. He kicked off his shoes before walking over to the couch and falling face-first into it. That was a total disaster, he thought. I should have studied more. It went that bad, huh? A tired voice asked from the kitchen. Shinso hadn't even noticed that his dad was there. The underground hero hadn't been required at the exams, making him the only one in the family who had stayed home. The teen just groaned into the cushions in response. He heard the almost silent padding of footsteps before the clink of a mug being set down on the coffee table. Instantly he sat up and grabbed the caffeinated drink, earning a snort from his dad. He glared over the rim TP the man who was leaning in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, his own mug, cat-designed, naturally, in one hand. The other was stuffed into the pocket of his hot pink sweatpants, which Shinso was 99% sure was his only non-grayscale article of clothing. You come here, my own home, and mock me so? The teen deadpanned. I can't stand this household. Then perish. They stayed in a cozy quiet, save for when one took a sip of their drinks, for a few minutes. At some point, the black-haired man had migrated to the other side of the couch, giving Shinso space. It was nice after the loudness of the other examinees, or the tense silence that was only broken by the scratch of pencils. It was familial. Eventually, Shinso set his finished coffee down and said, "It wasn't too bad. I made a friend, I think." His dad raised an eyebrow. It was no secret that the teen never got on well with his peers, through no fault of his own. Well, I'm not sure if it really counts, he continued. We met a bit ago at a cafe. I didn't see him again until today, and then I sat near him during the small break to get away from the other people. He didn't seem freaked out by my quirk, though. Which was possibly more surprising than the entire on-the-go analysis that went down immediately after. Shinso had told Midoriya his quirk to get the rejection over with, rather than string himself along with the hope the green net would be different. What actually happened was about the opposite. Good, his dad replied. As much as I know you hate social interaction, you need friends. Not all of us introverts can get adopted by extroverts, Shinso joked, smiling slightly. When's Pops getting back again? He has patrol from around now until 5, but we were thinking we could get takeout and rent a movie afterward. As long as I get to pick the movie. We are not watching another Disney movie. Not after last time. Uno! Izuku shouted, grinning at his mom. The woman glared playfully at him, before slapping down a +2 card on the pile. His smile dropped, a mock-betrayed look taking its place. Dejectedly, he pulled the top cards of the deck, making his card count 3. His mom placed a green skip card. Uno, she said triumphantly before slapping down her final card, a green 4. Izuku sighed, dropping his hand onto the table. He was so close to winning. The score was now tied, both of them having won a round each. They had had katsudon for dinner as a form of celebration for completing the exams, which he had been working himself up about for weeks. After, they settled on the ground in front of the couch with copious amounts of snacks and an armful of games. They had decided on Uno for the first few rounds. Want to play something else? He asked, gesturing to a Mancala board set. It wasn't something he played often, but it was pretty enjoyable. Sure thing. You set up, I'm going to grab a drink. Want anything? If we have any ginger ale left. She stood, pushing off against the couch seat with one hand. Izuku gathered the cards and stuffed them into the packet. He heard his mom rummaging around, but didn't think much of it. Izuku. The boy turned at his name, eyes widening in surprise when he saw the wrapped gift in her hands. She walked over and handed it to him. It felt like some piece of clothing. Before opening it, he looked to his mom. What is this for? I don't even know if I got in, His mom smiled, sitting back down. Think of it as an early celebration for finishing junior high. I had a hard time back when I was in school with all the drama and changes that happened. She waved her hand as if waving away memories. But you won't want to hear about that. Go on, open it. After a moment, Izuku ripped off the wrapping. It was a mostly gray hoodie, with black and yellow running down the middle. A pair red wings were printed on the back. Izuku gasped. This is one of the first Hawks merch. It's based the costume he debuted in. It wasn't too heard of since he only had it for a week before changing to his iconic tan jacket shortly after, and didn't have a big following when he did wear the gray. Thank you so much. He shifted slightly, leaning forward to hug her. The woman wrapped one arm around him, resting her other hand lightly on the back of his head. I'm so proud of you, Izuku, she whispered, voice cracking. Izuku couldn't speak, just nodded his head into her shoulder and didn't even try to stop the joyful tears that streamed from his eyes. Maybe it won't come. Wait, no, of course it's coming. They send out letters no matter if you get in or not, right? But I could have done so badly they don't even do that. Yeah, that's probably it. Time to walk into the forest and become one with the moss. So long, society, it's been dash. Izuku's worried mumbling abruptly stopped when his mom practically crashed into the room. Izuku. Left. Here for you dash. She stopped trying to talk, taking a deep breath. She looked and sounded almost as jittery as he felt, with wide eyes that spoke of apprehension. There's a letter for you from Yue. It just got here, I put it on the dining table. That caused the young brunette to jump up from where he had been sitting, leg bouncing on the couch. With a burst of adrenaline he only ever felt during his vigilante hours, he shot toward the table. His vision zeroed in on the envelope from Yue. It was thicker than expected. There seemed to be more than one piece of paper inside. Izuku's hands trembled as he slid into the seat and ripped the letter opening, distantly noticing his mother sitting down beside him. Sure enough, there was not one, not two, but 3 sheets of paper inside, all folded crisply into thirds to fit. That was a bit strange. If the school was rejecting him, he has assumed they would make it as short as possible. Regardless, he pushed 2 of them to the side and kept the one that seemed most important. A red ink stamp with the official UA seal was emblazoned on the front. He stared at it for a second. His breathing stopped. Was this going to end like last time? Would he be able to stand it if it did? You're not going to find out like this. Letting his breath out in a small sigh, the boy, the vigilante, the student unfolded the letter. Midori-kun, thank you for your interest in the general education program. We here at UA would like to formally welcome you to Class 1C. After looking over your academic achievements, as well as your scores on the official UA entrance exam, you have been selected, along with 59 of your peers, to be part of our newest general studies year. Attached with this letter is a list of items you will need for the school year, along with a form that needs to be filled in for size specifications on your school uniform. Please send the completed form back to the return address on the envelope by the end of the week. Uniforms will be shipped to arrive the week before the first term starts. Plus Ultra. The paper slipped from Izuku's numb hands, yet his eyes stayed glued to the place it was before. Izuku? Are you all right? Tears gathered in his eyes, quickly spilling onto the table as he pushed the acceptance letter towards his mom. There was a beat of silence before she practically tackled him in a side hug, her own eyes wet. Oh, Izuku, I'm so proud of you. You worked so hard for this, she cried. The younger brunette shifted in her arms to wrap his own around her, not bothering to wipe his eyes. A grin, fiercer than he ever had before, worked its way onto his face and refused to leave. It wasn't the hero course, but he was going to UA. They sat there for a few minutes, hugging, only disentangling themselves when it was time to make dinner. Izuku was left to his thoughts, which naturally turned into him theorizing. I wonder who's going to be teaching. Present Mike for one, who else was at the exams? He began muttering without realizing. Ectoplasm and Midnight, right? I think I saw Snipe as well. Who? You seem chipper tonight. The bored tone of the underground hero cut through the quiet air, causing Watcher to jump slightly. Turning, he locked eyes with Eraserhead before quickly angling his view down slightly, deciding to focus on his nose. Eraserhead was in the middle of the small rooftop, managing to sneak up on the boy despite Watcher's practiced awareness. Realizing the man was expecting a response, he said, "Why, guess I am. Got some pretty good news today, so I am pretty excited. Nervous too, but mostly excited." The snarky attitude that always let itself be known during his time as a vigilante rarely seemed to take control whenever he talked to the hero. His stutter wasn't as bad as it was during school, but Watcher still winced slightly at the slight stammer in his voice. Eraserhead hummed at that, coming to stand by the edge with the vigilante, not within arm's length, never that close. He glanced at the vigilante before turning his head to look over the street below. His slouched posture coupled with his hands being shoved into his pockets suggested he was relaxed, but the greenette knew the hero would never let his guard down on patrol. "That looks like it was a nasty bruise. Some villain get the drop on you?" Watcher raised a hand to where the bruise from Kakin had almost entirely faded. The only testament to its existence left was a yellowish circle. "Something like that?" he muttered. The hero raised an eyebrow at that, but thankfully let it drop. Unfortunately, he decided to bring up a more uncomfortable topic, if that was possible. "Listen, problem child dash." Watcher tensed at the name. Eraserhead seemed to notice and amended his wording. "Watcher, you're a good kid. You're smart. You can analyze a situation and use it to make improvements. Your fighting technique is lacking, but you make up for it in speed and evasion. However," he continued, seemingly uncomfortable with what he was about to say, "you can't keep doing this." The greenette automatically took a step back at those words. The hero hadn't tried anything since the first night, but he didn't want to risk anything. "What do you mean?" "I think you know what I mean." Eraserhead gestured to all of Watcher. "Running around in the dead of night. Picking fights with people at least twice your size. Being a vigilante." "But I'm helping people." Anger took hold of Watcher then, and his words became more forceful. "I won't stop, Eraserhead. This is my chance to make a difference. My only chance. Don't you think that if I could be a hero, I would have? If I could go down literally any other path, I would have? But no, I couldn't. All because other people saw a dash." He clamped his mouth shut before he could continue. He wasn't entirely sure how he was going to finish that sentence. A quirkless loser? A stupid Deku? A no-good, whiny brat who took a spot in a classroom meant for someone with a useful quirk. That doesn't matter. What matters is this is my choice, my decision. This is how I help people. The mini-tirade seemed to have surprised Eraserhead because he stayed quiet for a few seconds. When he spoke, it was softer, slower. Caring maybe, though it was hard to tell under the ever-present mask of boredom. "Kid," he hesitated before continuing, "did I get it, okay? Growing up with a quirk others decide are bad and villainous isn't easy. There are other options though." This certainly wasn't what Watcher expected to happen tonight. It seemed he inadvertently made the hero come to the conclusion he had some sort of hated quirk. That's okay, he could work with that. If you're in a different course at a hero school, you can transfer to the hero course if you impress your teachers enough. Even if you aren't, there's a possibility to transfer schools, then transfer courses. Hell, there's even the Vigilante Rehabilitation Program. I wouldn't recommend it as a first option, since it was made with adults who have full responsibility in mind, but it's there. Transfer courses? The explanation threw Watcher for a loop. Whatever reaction to his rant he was expecting, it wasn't that. "What did you mean, transfer courses?" "I mean that this isn't your only option, Pro Watcher," Eraserhead easily replied. "You want, or wanted at least, to be a hero, right? Back when I was a student, I went to UA. There, if a non-hero student does well in the sports festival and impresses their teachers, they have the chance to transfer to one of the hero classes." Watcher felt his eyes widening, hands going slack. If the hero noticed his shock, he didn't show it as he continued, "I'm not sure what the rules are in other hero schools, but I know they're required to have a similar option. And with the potential you have, kid, they'd be idiots not to want you in." His anger left as suddenly as it came, and hope rose in his chest. Watcher quickly squashed it down. Instead, he crossed his arms in front of his chest. Sure. Maybe. That might work for some people, but he tightened his grip slightly. I doubt it would work for someone like me. You know how they are. As if a teacher would want to help me. You'd be surprised, the hero refuted. It's how I got here. The boy's eyes widened in surprise. He had always assumed Eraserhead breezed through whatever the entrance exams were. The thought that he, one of the most efficient underground heroes, had to fight for his hero education just felt wrong. The hero sighed at Watcher's silence. Just tell me you'll at least think about it. His throat burned as he choked out,